Okay, we're recording.
Okay, Athena, are we almost ready to start? I know we have 3 counselors missing, but I just want to, we have a quorum. Recording? Thank you. Good evening. It is May 2nd, 2022, pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, extended by Chapter 22 of the Acts of 22. This meeting is being conducted via remote means. Given that we have a quorum of the council present, I'm calling the May 2, 2022 meeting to order. It is a regular town council meeting and we're calling it to order at 6:34. I'm going to call upon each counselor by name. Please let us unmute, and let us know you can hear us and we can hear you. And then we will proceed. Shalini Balmilne.
Present.
Pat DeAngelis.
Present.
Anna Devlin Gothier.
Present.
Lynn Griesmer is present. Mandy Jo Haneke.
Present.
Anika Lopes is absent at this point. Michelle Miller.
Here.
Dorothy Pam.
Here.
Pam Rooney.
Present.
Kathy Shane.
Here.
Andy Steinberg.
Present.
Jennifer Taub.
Present.
Alicia Walker will be joining us in about 10 minutes. There's no chat room. If you have technical difficulties, please let us know. And at that point, we will record it in the meeting and do whatever else we may need to do to make sure that we can proceed. We're going to now look at the announcements. And I just want to mention a meeting of the town council, actually the finance committee and the full town council will be on May 16, starting at 5 o'clock. That will be the public hearing on the budget. And the regular town council meeting that night will convene at 6:30. Okay. In addition to that, I've asked Athena to put up the announcement for the elementary school building committee's public forum. That is this Thursday, May 5th at 6:30. And that is via Zoom. Okay. We have no hearing tonight. We're going to proceed to general public comment. And I'm going to ask all of those people who are in the audience, and I just want to mention there are 6 people in the audience on Zoom. We have no idea how many are watching on Amherst Media. Please raise your hand if you would like to make public comment. Before you do that, I want to mention that 2 items have been removed from this agenda for later consideration at another time. The first is the adoption of the 2022 Art Week proclamation. That's 6A. The other item that has been removed is 6D, a resolution protecting adult access to plant medicine and prioritizing public health responses to controlled substance possession. I mentioned that because some of you may want to make comments on those, and actually we're not going to act tonight. So I see 2 hands at this point. I'm going to call on Margaret Sawyer. Please enter the room, state your name, where you live.
Hi, my name is Margaret. I live at 733 Station Road. It's nice to see you all. I'm here tonight because there's a new house that's gone on the market down the street from me, and it's been abandoned since 2012. It's 669 Station Road. It just went on the market for 170,000. What I know about the house is that it was abandoned in 2012 after it had been rented, and the back taxes weren't paid. And my neighbor who's on here, my new neighbor, Grover, is going to also talk a little bit more about this and has some more details. But it's been a blight on our street for a long, long time. And we know that the town asked for the taxes to be paid. Over 80,000 was owed. And now the house is on the market, and it is a hot ticket item over on Station Road. There are like 6 cars parked out there right now. Everybody's looking at this house. We know that there's a bobcat den on it and a bunch of felled trees in the backyard, and it's completely condemned. It is actually condemned. And my concern is it's been sitting here empty for a long, long time. The town hasn't, and I'm concerned that the town may not have ever recouped those taxes. The 80,000 number is very similar to the amount of money that it would take to make the tech and art teachers be full-time. I hope you'll all pay for that. I know Bockelman passed it to you, Mr. Bockelman, to make that decision. But I'm concerned that we're missing out on opportunities to get that money, but also more importantly, that we don't have a good system for managing blight and for making affordable homes in our town. I know about another family that's being evicted soon, and people can't afford to live in our town, and we should make that house and other houses more affordable. It's a little rambling, but it's a weird moment to be sitting here with this empty house that's likely going to be flipped and sold for, the last house that was sold on our street was sold for 800,000, which is shocking. And I don't want that to keep happening. So I hope you guys will make a good affordable housing plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Grover Wayman Brown. And I apologize if I have mispronounced your name. Please enter the room, state your name and where you live.
Hi, thanks. You did pretty good. It's Grover Wayman Brown, and I live at 677 Station Road, right next door to 669 Station Road. And as my neighbor Margaret mentioned, I recently moved in next door to this home and learned from my neighbors that it's been sitting empty since 2012, and I moved here or back here from the Bay Area and worked as an affordable housing advocate with an organization there that specialized in advocating for affordable homes. And it seemed to me pretty tragic that this house has sat empty for almost a decade when it could have been used as a home for any family if it had been sold and repaired shortly after the taxes stopped being paid. But then in looking into it, because I was curious about potentially collaborating with my neighbors to buy it or work with a land trust to buy it and make it permanently affordable, I started calling the city staff and asking, what's the deal with this? Has it been condemned? Why is it sat so empty with so much blight with nothing happening with it? And was told that the city didn't take abandoned blighted properties and that it was merely an issue of working with the estate that owned it, which was owned by an absentee landlord who it seems probably aged and couldn't maintain her properties anymore. And she owned a number of homes that in 2013, I researched and found the documentation that the city of Amherst did a formal taking in 2013 of the property. And I haven't been able to find evidence of what happened between then, because Sunday night the property was put on the market and there's been now 50 people at least in really expensive foreign cars and giant pickup trucks going to look at it, different people every 15 minutes. And I imagine the house is going to go quite a bit over $200,000 and again be resold for $800,000. And so I'm really hoping, I emailed some of you on Saturday evening, but I'm really hoping that this can be an example of how whatever policy you have in place is not working to utilize what the city has available, which is that for almost a decade, the property was blighted and the taxes weren't paid. And it could have been taken and then put a permanent affordable housing deed requirement on the property, or only bid out to people, to organizations or people who would make 2 units on it and make them affordable. There's all kinds of options that could be utilized to create long-term affordable homes using what we have. But waiting until the market's hot enough and the LLC gets their act together to set it out to the highest bidder is not a policy that advances affordable housing in our community. So I really hope that this example, which I find a real kind of tragedy, can be an example to create a better policy into the future. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Adam Fink, please enter the room, state your name and where you live. While you're doing that, I also want to note that Alicia Walker has joined us. Alicia, can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me, Council?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Alicia, as well. Adam?
Hi, my name is Adam Fink. I am a student at UMass Amherst, and I am here to voice my support for decriminalization of plant medicine in Amherst. My life personally has been changed immeasurably by the support of plant medicine. I was very depressed as a high school student, and my experience on psychedelic mushrooms and on other plant medicines has changed the trajectory of my life like no other medicine has. I spent years and years using, SSRIs and these pharmacological pills that were given to me, and none of them worked. And I developed this like treatment-resistant depression. And when I was a freshman in college, I had my first psychedelic experience, and I was able to see my mental patterns and the habits I'd formed and how they were keeping me from living my fullest, healthiest self. So today I'm just here to voice my support for the Bay Staters initiative that is being put to vote, I believe, in the next week or two. Any town councilors that are more interested in some of the studies, we would love to reach out to and give more information to. It has been studied that almost 50% of people who receive psychedelic assisted psychotherapy have remission of their depressive symptoms up for 6 months, almost up for a year. It's used for addiction treatment. It's used for overcoming trauma. And I just think it's really powerful if the people of Amherst made this statement and made the claim that they're not harmful addictive drugs. They are medicine when used responsibly, and that the policing and arrest of these substances is a poor use of our town resources. So I'm once again here to voice my support of the adult use of plant medicine act or motion going forward. And I encourage any town councilor who is interested to hear more about this to reach out to Bay Staters or to me or any other resources that we can help educate them with. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Adam Clem, please enter the room, state your name and where you live.
Hi, counselors. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to, well, first, my name is Adam Clem, and I just want to echo what my peer Adam Fink said. I know a lot of the counselors have gotten to know us through our involvement on this Bay Staters decriminalization initiative, and I just am showing up to further discuss that matter. And so to speak in support of that decriminalization measure, I just want to put forth the fact that this has been passed unanimously in Somerville, Cambridge, Northampton, and East Hampton. And so for Amherst to pass this measure, which as Adam Fink said, is going to be voted on in, I believe, 2 weeks, this would be a huge statement. There's certain parts of this measure that are even more ambitious than that of the other towns. So Amherst would really be leading the way with a new compassionate policy that helps people struggling with depression and addiction, which are really two problems that are demanding our attention, especially in the wake of this pandemic. And I just want to say that also my life has been personally affected through the responsible use of plant medicine, struggling with depression and a lot of isolation growing up. These substances really helped me as I came into college to really break out of that isolation and to really engage in more community with my peers, which I did really through this work with Bay Staters, as well as the UMass Multidisciplinary Psychedelics Club, which has really been a great force for change and spreading awareness of the responsible use of these plants. And so as a final note, I'll also echo what Adam Fink said, that a lot of the counselors I know here are already very much on board with this measure, but we'd like to widen our support even more. And so we encourage any counselors who are maybe unaware of this measure to please reach out to Bay Staters or myself, Adam Clem, my peer, Adam Fink, to further discuss this, because this policy would really mean the world to so many people in this town and would really lead the way for some greater state policy. So I just want to thank you all for your service as counselors and for all your collaboration and just hearing us out over and over again on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you for comments, Adam. Seeing no additional hands, I'm going to move on to the consent agenda. And the motion, the items were selected because they were seen to be routine. If you would like to have an item removed, please tell me so after I get done with the motion before I seek a second. The following items were selected because they were considered to be routine. The motion is to move the following items and the printed motions thereunder and approve those items as a single unit. 6B, adoption of the 2022 Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month Proclamation. 6C, adoption of the 2022 Children's Mental Health Awareness Week Proclamation. 8B, referral of the FY23 budget to Finance Committee. We will hear the full budget presentation tonight. This is just the actual referral we're required to do. 8C is referral of the flood insurance rate maps firm and flood insurance study to Community Resources Committee. This is actually just cleaning up a motion from last week where we did the zoning part, but we didn't do these other parts of that, of the flood maps. And finally, the approval of the following town council meeting minutes: April 25th, 2022, special town council meeting minutes, information session, April 25th, 2022, regular town council meeting minutes. Is there anybody who would like to have an item clarified? Kathy?
Yes, I'd like to remove the April 25th special town council meeting minutes.
Okay, so the motion includes the 6B, 6C, 8B, 8C, and of 11A, it includes only the April 25th, 2022 regular town council meeting minutes. Is there a second?
Second, Rooney.
Thank you. Any further discussion or clarification needed? Seeing none, I'm moving to a roll call vote. Shalini Bahl-Milne,
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis,
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier,
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye, Mandy Johanicky,
Aye.
Anika Lopes is absent. I'm sorry. Michelle Miller,
Yes.
Dorothy Pam,
Yes.
Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Kathy Shane,
Yes,
Andy Steinberg,
Aye.
Jennifer Taub,
Aye.
and Alicia Walker.
Yes.
Okay. Given that, as you may have noticed from the schedule that I gave you for the meeting tonight, we're actually going to, I'm sorry. We have two resolutions we have just passed, and we have a practice of at least recognizing the counselors who sponsored it and the community sponsors as well, and having a reading of the last paragraphs. The counselors that sponsored this were Counselor Haneke and Miller. The community sponsors included the Human Rights Commission, Professor Richard Chu, Dr. Leo Huang, Yasmin Padamsi Forbes, and Menakishi Bahram and Milian Khan. And Mandy Jo, is there anything else you'd like to add before you read the last paragraph?
Yeah, so this is the Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month Proclamation, and we want to thank Jennifer for putting us in contact with Professor Richard Chu, Dr. Huang, Yasmin Padamsi Forbes, Meenakshi Bafraf, and Milian Kang, and for their help in modifying this proclamation this year. This is the second year the council has been doing it. And so their help was greatly appreciated in making it more relevant to us and today. So now I'll read the last paragraph. Now, therefore, we, the Amherst Town Council, do hereby proclaim the month of May as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we ask you to join us in the town's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month celebration, which will be announced at a later time because we are working on finding a date and organizing that.
All right, thank you. And Michelle Miller, we're going to move to the 2022 Children's Mental Health Awareness Week proclamation, sponsored by Councilors Devlin Gauthier, Haneke, Lopes, and Miller. This community sponsor is Sarah Schwartz. Go ahead.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Amherst Town Council proclaims the week of May 1st through the 5th, 2022, to be Children's Mental Health Awareness Week to help cultivate awareness for all residents of Amherst.
Terrific. Thank you for both of those. And thanks to GOL for their ongoing review of proclamations and resolutions. With that, we're going to do a little drum roll, and we're going to ask the town manager, Sean Mangano. Where's Sonia? Sonia Aldridge. I believe there might be someone else, but we're going to ask them to make their presentation on the FY23 budget proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. So I think, Sean, you're going to share your screen. Perfect. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to present the budget for FY23. I'm really proud of this budget. We put a lot of time into it, hundreds of hours, dozens of people contributed to the work, and I think it's a really strong document. All documents that we mentioned tonight are available on the town's website under the town's budget page. It's listed under upcoming budget. In addition, we have an extensive schedule of public engagement, including roughly twice weekly meetings with the Finance Committee to go through every budget department by department. We have a public hearing on the operating budget coming on May 16th. We have a public forum on the capital program in June. We've scheduled a Cup of Joe event, which we had to reschedule that, but that's coming up. And there's lots of other ways you can convey. We have a Engage Amherst site that's available to people to comment on. And then people can obviously comment to the town council, because you are ultimately the ones who have to approve the budget. So next slide. So first, I want to start with our thank yous. So I don't get to thank folks often enough who have done this work. And you will hear from Sean Mangano tonight, our finance director, who really led the development of the budget from the very beginnings. Back in the fall when we were making financial projections and shared those projections with the budget coordinating group last fall, and then continued to make updates to them. And we continue to update them even as we speak. But I really want to mention Sonia Aldridge, our comptroller, and Holly Drake, our assistant comptroller, who continue to bring their savvy and expertise in leading the meetings with department heads. Each department has multiple meetings with town staff. And they are very comfortable challenging our department heads about their numbers, their assumptions, what they're trying to do. Assistant Town Manager Dave Zomack provided invaluable counsel throughout the process to me and to the team, and Communications Director Brianna Sunred ensures we are delivering a presentation that is clear and accessible to the public. However, it really does all start with the work being done by our department heads, and I want to thank each of the department heads this year. We had several new ones this year, including Recreation, CRES, and Senior Center Director. And then I also want to recognize my colleagues at the school department and library, the school superintendent Mike Morris and library director Sharon Sherry. They and their elected boards, school committee and library trustees prepared their budgets completely and timely with great thought and care. So next slide. So we are in challenging times. We have managed through a worldwide pandemic that has now morphed into supply chain and staffing challenges. And these things have created new pressures on our budget. Through it all, the town has been successful at taking on each challenge without drama and with conviction. And that will continue, I assure you. At the same time, the town council has provided leadership by establishing goals for the town through a robust public process. Two our overarching goals, sustainability and racial equity, serve as lenses for all of our decisions. Next slide, please. The budget I present to you tonight is aligned with the goals established by the town council, and our presentation will show you how we built the budget to meet the goals that you established. The budget is balanced. The budget does not require an override. The budget addresses some of the long-term needs of the town, specifically our need to invest in our built infrastructure, into public safety, and in our roads and sidewalks. It follows our overall financing plan that includes a strategic use of reserves built up over the past several years to manage the impact of our initial debt payments for our 4 major capital projects. Even with this use of small use of reserves, our reserves remain strong because we want to be prepared for managing the cost of our 4 major capital projects down the road. Next slide. So our budget, the town's budget, it always has 5 basic components. It's the municipal budget, which includes the town's 4 enterprise funds, the elementary school budget, the library budget, the Amherst Pelham Regional School District budget, which is considered separately, and actually you'll be looking at that tonight. That's already gone through a fairly robust process with the Finance Committee, and then the Capital Improvement Program. We also mentioned the Community Preservation Act budget, CPA budget, and the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant budget, because these things will give a complete picture of the town's finances when they're all seen in one location. Next slide. So the highlights of the budget. The FY23 budget totals nearly $90 million. This includes a basic 2.5% increase for the town, schools, and library. To that, we added $300,000 to the town for the creation of the new CRES program and increased the elementary school budget to 2.7% due to charter/choice tuition adjustments. We were able to achieve our goal of dedicating 10% of the tax levy to capital spending, a goal that we were on track to accomplish a couple of years ago, but was waylaid by the pandemic. We hope to maintain this important commitment going forward. We've remained disciplined in allocating funds to meet our OPEB and pension obligations. That is seen as an important indicator of financial strength when viewed by the bond rating agencies. The overall budget increase is 5.1%. I want to note that the Amherst School Committee voted to request an appropriation that is higher than the fiscal guidance provided by the Town Council. In my request to you, I've submitted the amount recommended by the Town Council. Under state law, however, the Town Council has the ability to appropriate an amount that is more than the town manager's budget if voted by the school committee, which they did. This requires a 2/3 vote of the Town Council. I want to thank community members, especially the Energy and Climate Action Committee, who helped establish our CARP program that helps set our agenda for how we're moving on sustainability issues. And I particularly want to thank the BIPOC community and members of the Community Safety Working Group for providing the brave leadership and direction to create our new community responders program, which we will always refer to as CRES. I am thrilled that our new CRES director, which I think you all have met, Earl Miller, is on board and is building this 3rd leg of public safety, along with police and fire EMS. The goal is to ensure that every member of our community feels safe and that we're able to provide the appropriate response to whatever situation arises. CREST fills in the void that had been met previously by police and fire. Next slide. So this budget and the town's finances continued to stand on a strong foundation. Over the years, we have been disciplined and made the hard decisions to do the things that are necessary and say no to the many needs that people want. It's not an easy place to be, but that's how you maintain solid financial positions. This budget strives to maintain our core services that our residents and businesses community have come to rely on. And our projections for operating and capital budgets go out 5 years and are transparent for all to see. Next slide. Our capital budget, which will receive its own public forum in June, achieves a threshold of 10% of the tax levy, as I mentioned. This budget addresses the capital needs of the 4 major capital projects, begins addressing the deferred maintenance on many of our buildings, and continues to make a substantial commitment to public safety and to better roads and sidewalks, which after this winter really need an infusion of funds. Next slide. This slide shows the major investments we are proposing to the town council for this year. It includes the roads and sidewalks that I mentioned. You see the 1.5 million up on top and the 200,000 for sidewalks down below. It also includes over $1.8 million in equipment for the fire department, bringing our investment in fire safety and EMS to over 2.8 million over the past 3 fiscal years. We have the funding for sustainability projects, a new gym floor at Crocker Farm. And then we've also included a cost escalation reserve of $100,000 because we have seen just in recent projects, cost escalations I mentioned earlier due to supply chain and labor shortages really impacting our capital projects. So we're going to get a little more, this is sort of an overview. We're going to get a little bit in more detail now, and Sean is going to carry it from here.
Thank you, Paul. Can you hear me okay?
Oops. Yes, we can.
Good. All right, let me just pull up the other presentation. All right, can you see the Amherst homepage screen on the screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, so before I get into the story map, I just wanted to quickly show people where to find the budget information. So if you go to your government and down to budget, and then click upcoming budget, you'll find all the documents that we're going to be referring to tonight. So Town of Amherst, there's the town manager's proposed budget, the capital improvement program, and then the budgets from the Amherst Public Schools, the regional schools, and the Jones Library all listed here. And there's lots of links in the budget document that will bring you directly here, but just in case. So this is the story map. And this is the second year that we've deployed or used this different type of sharing information. It's meant to be an alternative to going into the budget document or looking at the PowerPoint. Pulls out some of the highlights and just it makes it easier to digest if you like viewing it this way. It's better to use on your cell phone than maybe pulling up a PDF on your cell phone. So give us your feedback on whether you like these story maps or not, because we don't have to use them, but we're given at least one more year. So the way these story maps work is you can just keep scrolling down and it'll bring you through the whole story, or these buttons here in the middle, you can click on them and it'll bring you directly to that topic. So I'm just going to keep scrolling down to go through everything. But again, if you were just interested in economic vitality, you could click that and it would bring you straight there. And some of the information in here was covered in the PowerPoint, so I may skip through some things. There's a link here to the whole budget document. I won't click it because it'll take forever to download 300 pages. So I'm just going to keep going. So budget highlights. I think the only thing I'll mention here, because most of this was covered by the town manager, is you'll see our ARPA projects woven in through this presentation and throughout the budget document where it makes sense. So where ARPA projects are related to town council goals or to the budget, we've incorporated that into both all the presentations. And that's because many of those projects are just getting started now, or they're about to get started in FY23. So a lot of these things are still coming up. As the town manager mentioned, the operating budgets all had 2.5% increases, and there was additional funds for the municipal budget to fund the CREST program. and the additional funds for the Amherst schools for the charter and choice adjustment. And also as town manager, I'll just reiterate what he said about the school committee voted a budget that was higher than the financial guidelines issued to them in November. And so this budget proposal, the town manager's budget proposal, incorporates what was in those financial guidelines, but now goes to the town council to make a decision what you'd like to do. The next section of the highlights is on the general fund revenues. So we're seeing our revenues go higher, primarily led by local receipts, ambulance receipts, property taxes, and state aid. Local receipts, some of the areas we're seeing rise are good economic indicators such as hotel motel excise, licenses and permits, which rises when you see a lot of building going on, and departmental revenue, which rises when departments get back to normal, like our recreation department in Cherry Hill. And property tax revenue, sorry, I skipped over that. Property tax revenue, we're seeing our regular 2.5% increase plus new growth. One thing we're really seeing strong levels of the past few years is our new growth. And it sort of makes sense when you look around town and you see all the building and development going on. All of that translates into additional funds on top of the 2.5% tax levy increase. And that's really vital to maintaining our programming going forward and being able to invest in new initiatives. State aid is increasing 2.3% based on the governor's proposed budget. This was one area where it's not terrible, but it's not as good as we were all hoping. The state budget ended with quite a surplus last year, and their revenues are above their benchmarks this year. So many municipalities were hoping for much more than that, but that's what we have so far. And other financing sources is a combination of some different types of revenue. So one that's in there is the ambulance fund. When the EMS department transports somebody to the hospital, we bill for that service. And a few years ago, we raised those fees when we lost the Hadley routes. And so right after that, the pandemic hit. And so we weren't really able to realize or see what the outcome of raising fees was. So we're starting to see that now. That's the good news. We are starting to see revenues come back up. And so for FY23, that's supporting not only a base amount to support the operating budget, it's also supporting a planned purchase of an ambulance and some other equipment. Enterprise fund reimbursement. So these are indirect costs that the enterprise funds pay to the general fund for the services they use. So for example, the water fund uses the town's human resources, the town's IT, the town's accounting. They pay an indirect cost to the general fund for all that. During the pandemic, we reduced those fees to the enterprise funds to help them navigate through without having to raise rates during sort of a temporary revenue blip. And now that we are sort of past that, we have restored those indirect costs. So that's increase in revenue for the general fund, and it's an expense in the enterprise funds. And then the two other little areas here that I'll note, or three other areas I'll note, 100,000 of prior year unexpended capital is being proposed. This is to fund that cost escalation reserve that the town manager mentioned. We figured use old capital that wasn't spent to set aside in case these future capital projects come in more expensive. 75,000 is from Comcast to offset the debt for the municipal fiber project. That's going to continue for several years. And then 500,000 will be from stabilization to support the first year payment for the library debt, as the town manager mentioned. On the expense side, I won't cover all this because the town manager already did, but I'll just point out on the chart on the left, you'll see a little less than half of the total general fund budget goes to education. After that, the next biggest slice is public safety. This has increased from last year because of the additional funds for CRESS. So that's in that slice, that 13%. General government is at 9% after that. And then the next two are pension and capital at 8%. So this just gives you a snapshot of how we divvy up the general fund budget. Same thing here. I won't cover this because the town manager did, but if you look at the pie chart, the two biggest slices, the fire department is because of the inclusion of the ladder truck, and the public works highway is because of all the money for roads and sidewalks. This doesn't include any building projects in this chart, so it's all the other projects that make this up. So enterprise funds, they're separate than the $90 million budget you're looking at. These are separate programs that charge fees and have expenses, and they have to be self-sustaining and balanced. So these increases you see for water, sewer, transportation, solid waste, those are both the increases in expenses and also in revenues because they stay in balance. All of these, except for solid waste, saw reductions in consumption during the pandemic, especially water, sewer, but transportation as well with less downtown activity. And solid waste, for some reason, did better during the pandemic. But the other three are starting to recover now that we're coming out of it. And we talked about one thing that relates to this section that we talked about at the last meeting was the proposed increase in water and sewer rates. That's part of these increases up above. And the last thing I'll say here is for the transportation fund, the revised parking permits permit fee schedule that the town council adopted, we've started to incorporate that into the revenue projections in the future. So that's where that additional fund, the monies from the new fee schedule go into the transportation fund. And so we'll see that into the future. So the next section of the story map is just how to stay engaged. So there's links to the budget calendar, Engage Amherst. We're really trying to funnel all questions through Engage Amherst because it's really convenient for it notifies staff when a question comes in. We can answer it public or privately. We typically answer them publicly, and then it logs it. So anybody else who goes to the website can see the Q&A that's come before, and that will hopefully either answer a question or may stimulate a new question going forward. So as much as possible, we're pushing people to this Engage Amherst page to submit their questions. There's some links to the budget. As we go forward, we have the public hearing on May 16th at 5 p.m. and the capital improvement program public forum will be on June 6th. So the rest of the story map is structured along the lines of the town council's goals for the town manager. So I'll go through these quickly, but you'll see at the beginning of each section what the goal was for the year. So for climate action, the major elements of this plan include the $200,000 allocated in the capital improvement program for sustainability projects and $500,000 of ARPA funds specifically to implement strategies from the CARP. And our sustainability coordinator has already developed a plan and is starting to move forward with some of those strategies. Also included in the capital improvement program, you'll see many vehicles that are either proposed to have hybrid technology like the Ford police cruisers, or we have other vehicles like an ambulance and a ladder truck that will have anti-idling technology. And I think the library is proposing a fully electric delivery van. So more and more the vehicles that are being proposed are incorporating the greener technology. And then resources. So this is mostly staffing that we're talking about and what staff or what the town manager is prioritizing for staff. A lot of this specific area is under the sustainability coordinator. So the North Landfill solar project is almost complete. And another project that she's working on is the solar battery storage feasibility study. This was a resident capital request that came in a couple years ago from some high school students. It's finally made its way through the process, and we think it'll be complete this June. And this study will look at different municipal locations and come up, identify how feasible it is to install solar or battery storage at those sites. And then one other project I'll just note is we're getting closer to moving forward with the community choice aggregation program. Community health and safety is the next goal. So this is the area that includes the funding for the CREST department. In addition to the funding within the general fund budget, there's also ARPA funds that have been allocated for startup costs. We received some other grants that are helping with startup costs as well. So we're only using the ARPA funds once those other grants are fully expended because those are a little more restricted, but these funds are still there. There's been about $250,000 of ARPA funds allocated to the public health department for staffing, specifically for a public health nurse and for some support staff to work with the health director and some of the new duties and responsibilities that have come out of the pandemic. And then there's also $500,000 of ARPA funds that have been allocated for public mental health services. And I think we're going to be working closely with the CREST department as to how these funds will be deployed and it will probably continue some of the work that's been started under the DPH grant that we received, where we've started providing some mental health services to the public. Economic vitality. Again, all of this is ARPA. There's been $100,000 that will be application round will be opening up shortly to provide startup grants, growth grants, and some technical assistance grants to small businesses in town. So that I'm sure will be posted on the town website as soon as that application window opens up. $350,000 has been allocated for economic empowerment activities, specifically to support entrepreneurs, cultural organizations, local artists, and to foster opportunities with the university and colleges. And then lastly, $300,000 has been earmarked specifically for downtown improvements. And staff are working closely with the bid in the chamber on a lot of these activities. They've been working with local restaurants to establish outdoor dining spaces. One of the things in this goal is related specifically to parking. So we have established the new leadership structure that will continue into the future. The website's been updated, and the wayfinding system, which we hope to see very, very soon, not only will be good for sort of general economic development and pointing people in the right direction, it will include parking signage as well, which we know has been needed for a long time. And the North Common project is advancing as well and will be a major project in FY23. On the 4 major capital investment front, right now it's primarily staff time supporting the elementary school building committee and the Jones Library building committee, working with the grant programs and working towards meeting those milestones. And then in terms of public works, it's identifying a location that's really the next domino to fall. Once that location is set, that will move a lot forward in terms of the public works facility and the fire department. Housing affordability. I'll stop here for a second. If it seems like there's a lot going on, there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot of good stuff happening, which is nice. So in terms of housing affordability, $2 million of ARPA funds have been allocated to support the development of affordable housing and shelter transitional housing. In addition to that, the council approved somewhere around $800,000 recently of Community Preservation Act funds to support both of those initiatives as well. So there will be substantial funds in the coming year for development of affordable housing and the shelter and transitional housing. And then something that's sort of new that was approved by the council as well is this CPA funded housing coordinator who will help work with to maintain affordable housing and seek new affordable housing. And staff continue to work on the development of the affordable housing at Belchertown Road and East Street school sites, and to work with Craig's Doors on the temporary shelter locations and creation of a permanent shelter location. And then the next goal is racial equity and social justice. So this section includes the funds added for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So a 2-person department is fully funded in the FY23 budget. And this also includes $500,000 of ARPA funds allocated to explore the creation of a youth empowerment center. So that project right now is with our recreation director, who's overseeing the initial phases of that, and currently is working on a needs assessment, working with the school department and other partners in town to see where the greatest need is to then inform next steps. And resources have been allocated to support the work of the African Heritage Reparations Assembly, and in the future will be allocated to support the Community Safety and Social Justice Committee. And we will end with staying involved. There's some links to the budgets and Engage Amherst here. And as the town manager said, we start tomorrow at 9 a.m. with the Finance Committee doing a budget overview and digging into this in much more detail. The schedule for the Finance Committee review of the budget is on the website, so you can see every single department and when the Finance Committee will be discussing it. So if anyone's got a specific interest, go to the budget page and you can see that calendar. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I assume that for the moment that concludes presentation. Okay. So let me just pause for a moment and say a budget document is a very complicated document, but it also gives you a sense of the comprehensive nature of town government. And so it allows you to be educated not just on the costs of town government, but on what we actually do. And so as much as most of us could probably fall asleep reading the budget document, I really urge you to take it quite seriously and read as much of it as you possibly can. You will find out things that you never thought you'd need to know. With that, Paul and Sean and the entire staff, thank you for presenting us with this budget for this year. And with this, we begin a month-long process of examining that budget through the Finance Committee. Each of those committees is posted as a committee of the whole. And so that any town councilor who would like to join in those discussions as a member, if you will, actively engaged in those questions may do so. With that, I open the floor for councilors' questions at this time. Kathy Shane.
Thank you both. And I look forward to seeing actually the data and the numbers. And I would like to hear from the broader public on how much the storybook way of presenting. And one of my general questions, not for now, will be how much extra time does it take to do that? And does it add value, particularly for the larger public? I'd be curious the response. My one sort of question and request is on the ARPA funds. I would like to see a list of what came before us initially with proposals. There was at least one mentioned tonight that I didn't think we'd actually said yes to. It was on the maybe list. So I'd like to see of the funds that we're considering spending or have allocated, and then how much is remaining. So the second tranche, just an update on that. And I'm on the Finance Committee, so whenever is appropriate, because I think that's a resource that's critical to think of extremely carefully, because it's going to go away and where we do it. So I'd like to see accounting on that. And other than that, I'm on the Finance Committee, so there are several issues that I want to draw attention to, but I'll do them by sending questions through as we come to them. To flag just one, so people can hear and the public can hear, that's come up before, that my understanding is when the ambulance brings someone to the hospital, we can bill for it. But if we go to some of the places that call for just, and a large assisted living, for example, where we do help someone stand up, we can't bill for it. And at one point we were talking about, would insurers be willing to pay for some of that, because some of it avoids a hospitalization trip. So I just want to talk a little bit about that, because it's a fairly high percentage of all our calls that aren't to an emergency room in I won't say a true emergency, but need to be transported. So I would like to get more data, and I will just force out those questions for part of that discussion. And for all the counselors and the public, those are pretty well laid out on what day we'll be talking about which department. So that concludes my more general. Thank you very much.
Sean, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond specifically to the ARPA question. So on page 269 of the budget, we added an ARPA section because we imagine there might be some questions this year on it. So you can go there and you'll see the total amount that was allocated to the town. We provided a listing of the project allocations. So you can see how much has been allocated, and you get a sense of how much is still not allocated. And then on that page, there's also a link to our ARPA webpage that we set up a few weeks ago. On that ARPA webpage, we're going to have quarterly reports posted. So there's 2 quarterly reports up there now that just show the plan and what's been spent, and give some general notes as to the progress. And also on there, as projects are developed and sort of clarified, or there's more specificity as to the projects, we're posting project snapshots on there as well. You'll see, if you go and visit, you'll see the different projects. It just gives more detail as to what the project is, what the goals are for that project. One of the requirements of ARPA is we have to have benchmarks and measurable outcomes of how the money is spent. So all that is on the ARPA webpage, and we're happy to discuss that.
Thanks, Sean. And just my one other request is I can find it in our documents, but when we first looked at ARPA, we had a potential list, and then some of it was to be developed for this year. So I'm not clear to me when certain decisions have been made, and that's what I'll try to figure out more focused questions so you can see them and what I'm asking about. Thank you.
Thank you.
We can also provide the initial document that appeared in the town council packet when ARPA was first brought up, so that you can see the initial list and compare that to the list that's in the budget book. Okay. Pam.
I think you answered most of my questions. It was about ARPA funds. And for the listening public, I just wanted to ask the question, this is a one-time block of money, and that we're slowly eating our way through it with specific projects. Is that correct?
Yes. And can I just add to that, Lynn?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
And I think when you see the list, you'll see that most of the projects are aligned with town council goals, or they're specifically in response to pandemic-related realities that we faced. So, but again, happy to answer questions about any of the projects on the list.
I also recall that you did a variety of focus groups or listening sessions as you looked at what you might decide to fund. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, we held 4 listening sessions, and staff met with a variety of stakeholders to develop the initial list of ARPA projects.
Okay. Are there other questions? Jennifer?
Yeah, I'm getting very specific, but you had mentioned the wayfinding parking signage system. And I just wanted to ask if that was something that, was budgeted for and was going to happen soon. I mean, I'm thinking many of us just came from the ribbon cutting at the Drake, and there's just so many exciting things happening downtown that it might really be helpful, to improve some signage to the parking that's available downtown. And I guess I'm thinking particularly of the lot that's next to CVS, the town owns with 70 spaces. And I know because I pass it often that, many of this, it's very underutilized. And I think that people, particularly outside of Amherst, don't know that you can enter a 70 space lot, in that little driveway by CVS. So, I hope when that's part of what is being thought of with the wayfinding and signage improvement. So I wanted to ask if that was also, something that was happening soon.
Mr. Bachman?
So Sean could weigh in here as well. So I think there's 2 things. One is the wayfinding system, where we have funds to do that. And that system has been approved and reviewed. One thing we did is we put it on pause for a second because we wanted to talk with the consultants that had helped Amherst College with their wayfinding system, because we felt they were experts in it. They agreed to give us just a consult on our project because we wanted to make sure they had really good insights into where you place them and how they look. So that has happened. So our staff have met with Roll Barassi, I think is the name of the firm. And then I think for shorter term, like why not right now, the signage for the lot behind Town Hall and what's called the CVS parking lot, to let people know that there is plenty of parking available. It's hard for people to find it. So that's why the sort of intermediate signage is really important. So we agree with that.
Okay. Shalini?
Yeah, thank you. Could you provide an examples or explanation for the ARPA funds for the startups, 100,000 for startups, and then 350,000 for economic empowerment, and 300,000 for, again, economic improvements?
I think it's okay if I speak to that one.
Absolutely.
So I don't know about examples, but I can explain them a little bit more if that's helpful. So the small business grant, so for example, their startup, I think they're like either 5,000 or 10,000 per applicant. So there's going to be a portal that opens up actually for both the startup and for the growth grants, where businesses in town can apply. And so one requirement is you have to demonstrate you were negatively impacted by the pandemic somehow. It's a requirement of the ARPA grant in order to do this. So that will be an open process where businesses can apply. The bid is going to administer that grant program, and they will have a board or a group that oversees the award. The economic empowerment, that has not been awarded yet. We're still sort of working out the specifics, but it's meant to sort of take on three prongs. So one is supporting entrepreneurs and navigating the town's processes, so permitting, Board of Health stuff. We hear some of this from the bid and from businesses that it can sometimes be complicated or overwhelming to start a new business. So one prong of that money will be supporting entrepreneurs. A second prong will be supporting local artists and cultural organizations. We heard feedback specifically from the Cultural Council, and I see Matt Holloway, who's chair in the audience. And we heard feedback that they were impacted significantly by the pandemic. And one of the things they voiced was having just like a central point of contact for local artists and cultural organizations to work with to identify opportunities for them, to find out about renting equipment, to find out about what's going on in town. So it'll be used for some of that. And then the third leg is just trying to expand the economic opportunities with the university and college. We see that as sort of an area that can be strengthened, responsibly strengthened, but that will be a focal point. And I think the last one you asked about was downtown improvements. So those funds have gone to help support the Drake and some of the startup costs for the Drake to make that a reality. And so, and then we'll also support some programming. And so for all these ARPA initiatives and many of the other ARPA initiatives, there's equity criteria as well. So like for the small business grant program, 50% of those must go to BIPOC business owners, BIPOC, LGBTQ, women-owned, or another marginalized group. So all that is also spelled out on those project snapshots. If you want to go take a look at those, it lists what those equity criteria are. So as much as we could for every one of these, we tried to build in a measure there. Was there another question?
Yeah, just a follow-up question. So I love everything that you said, and I'm just trying to imagine that the funding, let's say it's going to help small businesses navigate the inspection system and all. So is that through personnel, or how exactly is that money going to help people?
Yeah, so it would be through personnel somewhere. We're looking at, it may be a contract with somebody to provide that personnel, but it would be labor. And for the economic empowerment one specifically, it would be labor of some sort for each of those.
Right. And then the last thing associated with this is by when do we have to spend the money?
Mm-hmm. So the money has to be obligated, meaning contracted somehow or committed by December 31st of 2024, and it has to be spent by December 31st of 2026.
Okay, so we feel comfortable and we have enough time to spend it then.
Yeah, we don't want to wait. I mean, we also aren't trying to wait too long. We know there's need now, and we don't want to get to a point where we're spending money just for the sake of spending it down. So so I think we're in a good position right now.
Okay, thank you. I have other questions, but I'll wait. I'll come back.
Okay. Paul, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to give one example. So one of the things that has shown us recently that we've we had a very recent example of how hard it is sometimes to start a business in our community, because people need to have drawn plans by an architect or someone else to develop really detailed drawings. And for many small businesses, they don't have the funds to do that. So they were thinking about having an architect or someone who could help a small business come up with the floor plan that they would need to submit to the design review board, for instance, for them to get approval. So we're thinking about all the different ways we can do to give a little bit of seed money to somebody who wants to start a business, and to already even look at do some fit plans for existing retail space that we could show to people who are looking at renting space to say, does this space work for me or not? We would be able to have some existing fit plans to try and promote economic development throughout the town, not just downtown.
Okay. Michelle Miller?
And just to follow up on that, Paul, so like the common share food co-op that's been trying to get up off the ground, would they be eligible for some of that funding to do some sort of assessment or pro forma work or something like that? And if they are, or what is the process that they would go through to be eligible for that? And I have a couple other questions. But
Sean, do we have that
Yeah.
level of detail?
So I would, without looking at the specific list, I can't say for sure, but I would say that's the type of thing that the technical assistance is for. I don't know enough about that specific entity to know if they would qualify, but yes, that type of stuff, that type of activity, a pro forma, sort of a business plan development of something like that, to ensure or to kind of see if it's a viable business, that would fall under that technical assistance grant program.
And so what would be the process for them to apply for that?
So there will be, again, and we'll try to get more specifics out. We'll post on our website as soon as the exact time frame is known, but there's the bid will open up an application portal, and then it'll be publicly available to whoever wants to apply.
Great, thank you.
And it should be, I would say, within weeks, maybe sooner, but we anticipate it very soon.
Okay, thank you. My other two questions are in relation to the town manager goal of racial equity and social justice. The first question is about, it says staffing assigned to supporting the work of the African Heritage Reparation Assembly. Can you just clarify what that means? Are we talking about the staff liaison or what?
Yeah, so we have a new DEI department that will have a director and assist. We do have a new DEI department that has a director and assistant director. One of the tasks of that department will be to support the African Heritage Reparation Assembly in your meetings and things like that.
Thank you. And then the second question is the $500,000 allocated to explore the creation of a youth empowerment center. Is that the same? So the CSWG had a recommendation for a BIPOC-led youth empowerment center. Is that the same? Are we talking about the same thing? And what is that $500,000 being allocated for? Is there a study that's being undertaken or?
Yeah, Paul, can I speak to that one?
Go.
So, so that project is based on the feedback, or not the feedback, but the recommendations of the CSWG. So originally when that project was put into the ARPA plan, the thought was we would open up some sort of request for proposals and see if another entity, a Boys and Girls Club, a YMCA, or some other type of provider would be able to leverage those funds to create a youth empowerment center in town. Once we started to go through it a little bit more, and we hired the recreation director, we decided we should explore first whether we could do it internally within our recreation department. So right now we're in that phase of exploring whether we could do it internally within our recreation department. So the 500,000, that I would say that funding is not being spent currently, other than potentially for some experts to support the recreation director. The bulk of that money is awaiting the outcome of a feasibility study.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So is the community safety working group or the successor body going to be part of that discussion and be in collaboration with the facilities or the recreation department? That's one question. And then at the library event on Sunday, I met a woman named Dr. Paula Starnes, I think it was, or Stams from YSET Academy, who said that their group was part of looking at a study. This is the first time I had ever heard of that group. So is that group involved in this particular study?
So in terms of the first question, yeah, the recreation department he'll be working with stakeholders on this. So he will be incorporating public feedback and input as he moves through the process. And as to that group that you described. So when we received the DPH grant, they were a partner, and one component of that grant was going to be to support this youth empowerment center sort of analysis or needs assessment. I can't speak for sure if we'll be working with them in the future, but up until this point, they were a partner on that.
Okay, thank you.
Alicia.
Thank you. Michelle asked a bunch of my questions, but I still have a couple. The first one I'm wondering about is the ARPA funds as well. And so I think it's great, and I'm really excited to hear that we'll have grants available for small businesses, because we know they were very impacted by COVID. But my question is, because it's my understanding that ARPA funds are to go back into communities and populations that were disproportionately affected by COVID. And so do we have a plan to be putting those funds directly back into the community and those people most disproportionately affected by COVID, which would be low-income families, things like that? For example, in Springfield, they have a application portal open where families directly impacted by COVID can apply for ARPA funds for their families, and things like that. And so I'm wondering how, or if we have a plan to support the actual communities and not just business owners with the ARPA funds.
Can I respond to that, Len?
Please.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So you're right. So with all those project snapshots, again, one of the things you'll see in there is sort of how it's focused on the communities most impacted. And so specifically to your question, so we have a program, one of the grant funded programs that will be starting soon is, I don't know if it's exactly like what you described, but it's a resident emergency aid program that we're partnering with Family Outreach on. And it'll be a program that's restricted to certain income levels that can apply if they were negatively impacted by the pandemic. And so it'll support potentially back rent, back utilities, back mortgage, things of that nature. So there's, I think it's 100,000 that's allocated to that to start. There's other programs like food assistance, where we're working with the Survival Center for the next 3 years to help continue the meal delivery program. And those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. But I think you're right with all of them. You know, one of the focuses is trying to make sure that it supports the communities most impacted.
Alicia.
Thank you. And then I just have one follow-up question to that question. And is that allocation that for that fund that we'll be working with the Community Connections, Amherst Community Connections, is that allocation in the budget somewhere? Or is that, I couldn't actually find, I was trying to scroll down to the ARPA page.
Yeah, sorry.
269, but I couldn't find it.
So it's actually, yeah, it's page 269, or you can find it on the ARPA webpage. So it's not in the general fund budget because it's part of this grant program. So think of it as sort of a separate pot of money with its own budget. And so, yeah, it's called the Resident Emergency Aid Program. And I think it's actually 150,000, but yeah, you'll see a line item there for resident emergency aid, and that's what those funds are meant for.
Awesome, thank you. And then my next question is about the DEI office. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but I just saw an allocation of $61,802 for 2 employees for the entire year. So are we only providing them with salaries and no actual budget for the DEI office to do actual work?
Right. So some areas we talk about how much was added for this year, and some areas it's the total. So that 61,000 is what was added to what existed previously to fully fund it. So there'll be 2 full salaries, one for a director and one for an assistant director, and there will be a supply budget as well. Now I'll add that the supply budget for both DEI and CRESS will probably be a work in progress as we go through the next couple of years and see exactly what their supply needs are, but there are initial supply budgets and professional development budgets and things like that for both of those new departments.
So thank you.
Okay. Are there additional questions from, yes, Jennifer?
I just, for clarification, for the $500,000 for the BIPOC-led Youth Empowerment Center, is that for a study, or can some of that actually be for the center?
So some of it could be for the center. I think right now it's very open-ended what that could look like. So it's hard to know exactly where those funds will go because there's no, currently there's not a space. We don't know if it's going to be in-house or not in-house in terms of, run by the town or not run by the town. So I would say it could be for anything related to the creation of a youth empowerment center currently. And I wish I could give you more details, but it's just, we're not at that phase of knowing what it's going to look like.
Yeah, because it sounded like, I guess what I was trying to get at, it sounded like it was just for a feasibility study. That seemed like really a lot of money.
No.
For a
We're performing the recreation director along with stakeholders will be sort of completing this. It's a feasibility study of whether we could do it in-house. When I say feasibility study, it's whether the recreation department could do it, which is why the recreation director is sort of leading that charge. And if the outcome of that might be the recreation director says, no, we can't do it. It's something we can't take on. We don't have, without these additional resources. And if that's the case, then we would go back to open it up to see if there's outside groups that would want to potentially run it.
I'm going to push a little further. So in other words, the 500,000 is not for the study.
No.
But for the actual implementation.
It's for implementation. The one thing I'll say is, again, it may support the hiring of a consultant, which would be a very small fraction of it. If we need to do some sort of data gathering or community outreach, that kind of thing, where we couldn't do it in-house. But as of right now, I don't think any of the funds have been, I can say pretty confidently, none of the funds have been spent yet because we've had other resources to do it.
Okay. Paul, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just to frame this a little bit more, when we did the ARPA plan, this is over a year ago, we basically wanted to have a slug of money that was available for this initiative. We didn't know exactly how it was going to work, but we knew we wanted to have a substantial amount of money available for the initiative. And when you have a project like this, you delegate it to one of your department heads, who is the recreation director, who has come on board to say, this seems to be in your wheelhouse. Start to work on this. You take ownership of this. And so it isn't like a $500,000 study. That'd be, a lot of people would like that study. But he is looking at needs assessments. What does the community need and that type of thing. And then we'll do the internal assessment of their staffing abilities and whether that's something that they think is a good thing for them to do, or if it's something they would work through someone else to do.
Okay, Alicia.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can keep track of this. Like if I were interested in knowing what the progress of the feasibility study and working on the Youth Empowerment Center, where would I be looking to find those updates? And also just wondering who are the stakeholders that are working on this and where are they in the process now? Like, have we started the feasibility study, or that's something we're looking to do?
But is it okay if I share my screen real quick one more time? I think it might be helpful if I show the ARPA page and the quarterly reports. I think, at least for your specific question, we can, I think connecting with, through the town manager with the recreation director is how you can get sort of real-time updates. But is it okay, Lynn, if I share my screen one final time?
Please, of course.
Okay. So this may look a little small, but this is the American Rescue Act plan page we set up. The initial spending plan that we released back in November is down here. Over on the right, there's quarterly reports and project information. So quarterly reports, we have two. So the most recent one through 3/31. So these are on the left are all the different projects that have been identified for that round one spending and the sort of the ARPA terminology for where they fall. How much was allocated, how much has been expended, and if there's been any funds contracted, encumbered, and then notes and updates. So there's not a lot going on here yet because we haven't spent a ton of the funds. We've been in this planning phase the last few months. I will say that's starting to transition to implementation. So definitely check these out and let me know if you have questions. And then the one other thing I'll just show real quick is the snapshot. So again, as projects move along and get ready to implement, we're posting these here. So you'll see a number of project snapshots here. So I'll just pick one that was sort of a more interesting one, is the food assistance program. So you'll see if there's a partner with us, what the category is, how much was allocated, a description, how we're promoting equitable outcomes, and then some of the measurables, so output measures just in terms of how the funds are going to be spent, and then outcome measures in terms of, what are we hoping to achieve. So there's going to be more posted, but there's quite a few up there that people can look at now if they want.
Thank you.
Alicia, do you have a follow-up question?
No, thank you.
Okay. Dorothy?
Do we have any statistics on the number of people who are behind on their rent or behind on their mortgage? I mean, I read the articles that there's a very major problem coming upon many communities very soon, and that all of the relief that's been granted will be stopped and the moratorium will be over. But is there any way from the town of Amherst what the real situation is amongst renters and homeowners?
I don't have any numbers offhand, but I'm sure we can between, we did do a rental assistance program with CARES. And so we saw what the demand was back then. And then I think Family Outreach of Amherst, who we're partnering with, they may also have some statistics. One of the things we'll get from all these projects is data too. We're sort of aggregated high-level data that we can see what the impact was. So we can try to get more of that, but I'm sure I don't have it personally, but I'm sure we can find it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there additional questions? Okay, let me just note that we've already referred this through our consent agenda to the Finance Committee. They will be back in the beginning of June with a recommendation, and at that point we will move forward with our vote as a council. But as the town manager mentioned, there's many, I should say, opportunities for input, both in terms of public forums, in terms of hearings, and also just general public comment, as well as email and our special way to comment through email as well. Plus a variety of district meetings that are happening at this time. Shalini, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there'll be another opportunity or another time to understand the $52,000 that's being asked for by the school committee.
Could you restate that again?
Yeah, well, will there be another opportunity to understand from the town manager about his decision with respect to the $52,000 or around that much that's being asked by the school committee? And what was the reasoning, since we've received $60,000 or something from the state for the school, and what the reasoning is for not passing it on to the,
Thank you. Mr. Bachman?
Yeah, so actually the question would go to the school committee why they are asking for additional funds, and you will be reviewing the school committee's budget for the elementary schools. What I've presented to you is what you asked me to present to you in terms of what are your guidelines for putting a budget together. They have voted to do more than what you had asked me to do in terms of my goals. So and you're allowed, that's a reasonable thing to have that conversation with the school committee about what their refunding request is. But just, I think people need to remember that the council only votes a bottom line for the budget. You do not say what goes inside the budget. You vote one number and the school department decides how it wants to pay that, how it's going to allocate the funds that you vote for them.
Are there any further questions on this particular issue?
I guess I have a follow-up question.
Please go ahead.
So I know that we had asked, we gave them the guidelines, but then we received the money afterwards from the state, which was 4. So it's like a unique situation, it seems like. So, but what I'm hearing from you is that we will have an opportunity to hear and discuss this at a later point. So it doesn't have to be done today. I just wanted to make sure.
Absolutely. There is a whole finance committee meeting dedicated to just the schools. Okay. Sean, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say two things. One, what you just said, which is I think it's the 12th is the date that's dedicated specifically to the schools. The other thing I'll just say in respect to how the revenue works. So we base our budget on the governor's budget. The money I think you're talking about is a subsequent version of the budget, but it's not the final budget. And we keep our budget projections tied to the governor's. And the other thing I'll say is we don't tie usually revenues to specific departments. It goes into a sort of a big pot, and we divvy it up to all departments. We give, or the town gives the schools far above the Chapter 70 allocation. So even if Chapter 70 came in a little bit more, the town contributes much, much more than that to the schools. So all I'm saying is that the way our revenues work is if one particular area goes up, it doesn't mean that department that's associated with that revenue gets more money. It sort of benefits the whole town.
Okay. Are there any other questions on the budget at this time? Again, this is not the last opportunity. This is just the first. Okay, I am not seeing any. I want to again thank Paul and the staff for putting together the budget book and invite all counselors to read it with great detail. We're going to take a 5-minute break. And when we return, we're going to move on to the regional school budget. Superintendent Morris has joined us if there are any questions. But this is a budget that has been discussed at great length in the Finance Committee, and many of you have already been there. Okay, so we will return at 8:05. Thank you. As soon as you can, please return. Okay. If you can return to your stations, and as soon as you can, please turn your video back on to indicate you're back with us. So when you return, please turn your video back on. Thank you. Jennifer. And Shalini, when you're back, please turn your video back on.
Lynn, did you lose power? Because I lost it momentarily a few minutes ago.
We have not lost power.
Okay, there was a thunderclap and we were totally knocked off. So I'm just giving you a heads up.
Okay, thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. We're all still here. Shalini, all right. We are moving on to the regional school budget. This was presented to us over a month ago, referred to the Finance Committee. Tonight, we have motions that deal with the budget itself, the assessment method, and 2 different capital authorizations. We have already agreed through the consent agenda to take this up at this time. And with that, I'd like to call on Andy Steinberg to provide any Finance Committee report on recommendations.
I really hadn't been prepared to do so because I felt that the report was intended to take care of it for itself and hope that everybody had the opportunity to read it. I think that what was obvious, and there are other members of the Finance Committee here in the room with me, that the largest discussion was about the capital side, not the operating side. So there's several different orders as we proceed through. But I do note that that was the one that had the most attention. And the only thing I could add from what I know is that I believe Lovett had its town meeting this past weekend and passed both the assessment method and the budget at their town meeting.
Yes. Anna?
I just wanted to publicly thank Andy for the Finance Committee report and you, Lynn and Andy, for the follow-up that was included in our packets. It was extremely helpful and thorough. So I know we've been talking about this for ages and I still got a lot out of that report. So thank you very, very much.
Great. Okay. I stand corrected in that we did not vote the separation of the budget from the regular budget by consent. It is in fact in front of us. So the first motion before us, in accordance with section 5.5C of the Amherst Home Rule Charter and in compliance with sections 5.5A and 5.5B of the Amherst Home Rule Charter, to separately consider an act on the Amherst Pelham Regional School District budgets and assessment method for fiscal year 2023 due to the agreement with the 3 other towns in the regional school district. That was a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Devlin Gauthier.
Thank you. Are there any questions about the motion or in general? Seeing none, we're moving to a vote. I'm going to start with Anna.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye. Mandy Jo Haneke.
Aye.
Anika Lopes. I'm sorry, she's absent. Thank you. Michelle Miller.
Yes.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Kathy Shane,
Yes.
Andy Steinberg,
Aye.
Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
Alicia Walker,
Yes.
Shalini Bowman,
Yes.
and Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
Okay, it is unanimous with one absent. This next motion, in accordance with Charter Section 5.5, having been referred to the Finance Committee, having been recommended by the Finance Committee report of May 2nd, 2022, a public hearing held on April 25th, 2022, notice of which was posted for a minimum of 10 days on April 14th, 2022, to adopt Council Order FY 23-01, an order approving the Amherst Pelham Regional School District assessment method for FY 23 as presented. Is there a second?
Shane seconds.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, I'm going to move to a vote. Griesmer is first. Aye. Mandy Johanicky.
Aye.
And Nika is absent. Michelle Miller.
Yes.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
Jennifer Taub.
Yes.
Alicia Walker.
Yes.
Shalini Bowman.
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis.
Yes.
Anna Devon Gothier.
Aye.
It is unanimous with one absent. The next motion, in accordance with Charter Section 5.5, having been referred to the Finance Committee, having been recommended by the Finance Committee report of May 2nd, 2022, a public hearing held on April 25th, 2022, notice of which was posted for a minimum of 10 days on April 14, 2022, to adopt Council Order FY 23-02, an order approving the Amherst Pelham Regional School District FY 2023 budget and appropriating the town of Amherst share of the budget assessment as presented. Is there a second?
Second, Miller.
Thank you. Is there any further question or discussion? Seeing none, we're moving to a vote. Mandy Johanicky.
Aye.
Anika Lopes is absent. Michelle Miller.
Yes.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
Jennifer Taub.
Yes.
Alicia Walker.
Yes.
Shalini Bowman.
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
Anna Devon Gothier.
Aye.
And Lynn Griesmer is aye. Yeah, that is unanimous with one absent. The next motion is with regard to the debt authorization, and this is for everything but the track. Okay, so in accordance with Charter Section 5.5, having been referred to the Finance Committee, having been recommended by the Finance Committee report of May 2, 2022, a public hearing held on April 25th, 2022, notice of which was posted for a minimum of 14 days on April 14, 2022, to adopt Council Order FY 23-03A, an order approving Amherst Pelham Regional School District debt authorization for FY 2023 as presented. Is there a second?
Second, DeAngelis.
Thank you, Pat. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, we're moving to a vote. Michelle Miller.
Yes.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
Jennifer Taub.
Yes.
Alicia Walker.
Yes.
Shalini Bowman.
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
Anna Devon Gothier.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye. Mandy Johanicky.
Aye.
It is unanimous with one absent. The next is the motion that deals with the proposal for the track. In accordance with Charter Section 5.5, having been referred to the Finance Committee, having been recommended by the Finance Committee report of May 2nd, 2022, a public hearing held on April 25th, 2022, notice of which was posted for a minimum of 10 days on April 14th, 2022, to adopt Council Order FY 23-03B, an order approving the Amherst Pelham Regional School District debt authorization for FY 2023 as presented. Is there a second?
Second step.
Okay. Are there questions or comments? Mandy Jo.
Yes, I first have a question and then I'll lower my hand and then raise it again to make comments. But I'd like to hear from Dr. Morris or I don't know if Dr. Slaughter is here about the Leverett Town meeting or any other town conversations you've had with other towns regarding where their support is for the larger of these projects.
Dr. Morris.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Thank you for having me. At Leverett Town meeting, they opted, which is pretty typical of many of the small towns when there's not controversy on capital items, they did not put the capital items on their town meeting warrant. As you may remember, the way that works in regional districts is the towns have 60 days whether to pass or not pass capital requests. If they choose not to take it up, it passes by default, assuming all towns take it up. From informal or non-town meeting conversations with a number of the small towns, their ARPA funds seem to have mostly been accounted for as a funding source. So I can't speak for any of the towns more than suggesting that that's what they've told us. I didn't hear philosophical disagreement with moving forward with the larger project, but I think they'd be looking at the fundraising and grants and other mechanisms. But at Leverett Town meeting, they did not put it on the warrant because it didn't feel like they needed to. And this is not atypical in my experience.
Just 1 second. Are there any follow-up questions, Mandy Jo, at this point? Okay, Dorothy.
So we're talking about the 4 million plus artificial turf now?
The warrant itself is for 1.5 million. And then the issue is whether there will be fundraising. If we need to, we will pull up the slides that show the warrant and or the slides that talk about the track, both of which are in your packet.
This is just very strange to me that we're asked to vote for a certain amount, but then people want more money if they can find it. I just don't think I've ever been asked to vote on something like that before. So it's confusing me.
Superintendent Morris, would you like to speak to that? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it is confusing. So I appreciate that perspective and I'll try to see if I can help. So we brought this up at a 4-town meeting. It was clear that the 4 towns at that moment in time did not have consensus support for all 4 towns to support the larger project. The district's still interested in the larger project. I think many people in the community are still interested in the larger project, but from a funding perspective, we did not have consensus from the 4 towns. So we did not think it was wise. We did not believe it was wise to bring a proposal that the elected officials in all 4 towns would not support to be voted down. We've been in this place, one of my regrets in the job, we've been in this place for 5 years where the track is desperately needing repair and we keep on waiting for the perfect time to perhaps do a larger project and it never comes. And as a result, the track never changes and just deteriorates over time. So this vote for me assures us that we're moving forward with the most critical need, which is the track, while looking to see if we can find creative ways to fund a larger project that I believe and we believe is in the best interest of students and the community, frankly, because it's not just used by our students, it's located right on downtown. And I think a lot of community agencies and athletic teams would use it. But when we didn't receive consensus from the 4 towns to move forward with a larger project, we wanted to guarantee that this project we keep on waiting on until we can get consensus on a larger project doesn't wait another year. Because at this point, we've got independent officials coming to look at our track saying it's substandard and we shouldn't have any meets and questionable whether we should have practice on it. And it really needs to happen. So it's a very unusual arrangement. And for us at the district, we didn't want to lose sight of the larger goal, we believe it's in everyone's best interest to end up with a different complex, but we didn't want to see a project voted down because we received feedback from some of the other towns that this was not sustainable. for them fiscally, and we needed to think of another funding mechanism. So that's where we ended up with a sort of bifurcated model. I agree it's clumsy, but right, that we couldn't think of a better alternative. I'll put it that way, like democracy. So that's sort of where we're sitting with it. But I understand the confusion and apologize for it.
Can I ask just one question? Does the smaller project mean you will actually start to fix the track with grass, or maybe even reorient the track? Or does it mean you don't do anything because you're still hoping to put artificial turf on it? I want to know what you're going to do with what will start once the money's voted. What will happen?
So we had a timeline till kind of the beginning of the next calendar year to see if the fundraising comes through. Nothing would happen in the immediate term. And if the fundraising comes through, then we'll make the larger project. If the fundraising does not come through and we don't move forward with the larger project, it would simply be solving the track issue and not touching anything else.
Okay, Kathy?
That's a perfect segue to my comment. If people had time to read the Finance Committee report, this was the topic that received the most conversation. Many of us were concerned that the track is in dire need of repair and that the commitment to move forward one way or the other needs to be real, so that we were told a date around January 16th, mid-January. And there was even a discussion of had the RFP ready. So rather than backing off again, saying we still might want the bigger project, but we don't have funds committed. There's also a concern that, and I heard what you just said about Leverett to Mandy's thing, that in the smaller towns, the share that might be needed or is on the table that would be needed from CPA would be either all or almost all of their CPA budget. And it's a big take, it's a big ask, almost $1 million from Amherst. So it's not just the uncertainty, but the size. I ended up voting for this just to keep it on the map because we were told that if we turned it down, it would have to go back to the school committee, the regional school committee, to be reworded if we wanted to say just do the smaller project. And that's actually where I think I come down, because doing fundraising with the elementary school building coming down the pike, with the library coming down the pike, doing others, there's a real concern. And then the last piece, just, and Alicia can speak to this, we in the same meeting heard about the need to charge fees to participate in sports with Amherst. And then we were looking at a very large potential ask, almost $5 million for the fields plus the track. So I think my Superintendent Morris, that this commitment to move forward, if we don't raise the money, the sense was I almost wanted to put yes, we're voting for this as long as there is that commitment, rather than finding ourselves in February where people are saying, oh, maybe if we wait another month or we made another 6 months, we'll be able to get the rest of the money, but having a hard stop. And that was voiced by several members on the committee.
Dr. Morris.
I absolutely endorse a hard stop. And it's not just because I'm being asked about it before a vote. It's because it was designed that way, because we keep on delaying, and the track needs to be done. The downside is if the track gets done as is, it eliminates most of the options for renovating the field. And that's just a reality, right? And it's a reality we may have to live with, but it sets us back a generation for doing anything on the field, because if you don't reorient now, then in the field, the way it's organized and structured, you're basically committing to not doing that for quite a long time, or increasing the costs substantially, which wouldn't make any sense. And I'm totally with you on the hard stop. So I agree with that, and I get that, and I get the tension in the conversation, not just for this town, for the other towns as well.
Superintendent Morris, would you please speak to the issue that did come up at the Finance Committee about whether there are in fact subsidies for students who are not able to afford the fees to join sports?
Yes, no student is being not able to participate in sports because they can't come up with the funds. We work with families to be able to do that. And in our current regional budget, we couldn't afford to offer sports if we weren't collecting fees, unless there was a substantial increase to the athletics budget, and which would mean a decrease elsewhere. So we do work with families to do that. Our athletic director is committed to that. And, that is how we function. I think if you look at our student athletes, you'll see a very diverse cross-section of students coming from a wide range of socioeconomic backgrounds because of that commitment.
Thank you for that clarification on that misunderstanding. Mandy Jo?
Yeah, thank you. I will be voting against this authorization. Not because I don't support sports fields, but because I don't support the way the school committee has gone after this, and I don't support asking us to fund either or project without a hard choice as to which one it is. The creative ways have that Dr. Morris referred to have basically been passed on to the towns, and we just heard from Dr. Morris that at least one town probably doesn't have the funds to find the bigger project. And the bigger project is what I believe is, not only does it match and support the study for downtown athletic fields that the regional school committee and Amherst jointly paid for. And if that project is not done and the track, as Dr. Morris just said, is just resurfaced and rebuilt in its place now, we are hindering and for an entire generation the ability to do anything else until that track gets in bad shape again, so that you can justify spending money to reorient it and reshape it. Because right now my understanding is the shape of the field is not such that you can play certain sports on the inside of the field, even if you resurface this track. I haven't seen the school committee actually come out and support the larger project, not only at these meetings, but in the community. And so I don't actually believe that the larger project will get done. So I truly believe that a vote for this is a vote solely for the smaller project. And given where we are, I can't support the smaller project. And so I will be voting against this authorization.
Michelle?
Can I ask Mandy a follow-up question?
Please.
Okay. Mandy, what do you mean when you say you don't support the smaller project? Can you say why you don't support the smaller project?
Because it is not in line with the study that we did for reorienting the track and resizing the track so that a soccer field and a football field can fit within the track, and that people playing sports on those fields aren't facing the sun during sunset. It's not reoriented correctly right now. During sunset and close to sunset, half the teams are facing the sun directly, and that's not safe. And only doing a track resurfacing does not correct those problems until we would redo an entire track in a generation. And so I can't support just doing a track resurfacing. And I truly believe, given everything I've seen over the last month and what I heard from Dr. Morris today about his conversations with the other towns, that the larger project will not get funded, and therefore I just can't support this.
I'm looking to you. I value your opinion. So I'm wondering, what would the solution be if the repair is not ideal and you don't see a pathway for the larger project? What is the solution to the problem?
Mandy Jo, I believe she addressed that question to you. Do you care to answer it?
I don't know what the solution is right now, but given the way the school committee voted this authorization, there's no conversation about a solution because it defaults automatically to the lower project. And that's part of my problem with the way the school committee voted their authorization and is what they're asking us to do, because you can't have that conversation when everything defaults, if everyone approves this, to the smaller project automatically.
Okay, thank you. And so my original question, which is just something that I need clarified, is tonight, the motion we're voting on does not distinguish between the repair and the larger project. That's correct, right?
The vote we're voting on tonight is for 1.5 million, which would be the smaller project. With it is the condition, this is the way I understand it, okay? And if I'm wrong, please correct me. If by the middle of January 2023, the Booster Club is able to raise a certain amount of money and other options are there for raising money as well, then the option for the larger project is still open. Dr.
Okay.
Morris, I'd like to ask him to further clarify that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think that's right. I think the only thing I'd add is the additional funds that towns may choose to contribute via CPA or grant funds. It's not just the boosters that sort of some of the models that were created included non-appropriations funding sources from the towns, or at least non-traditional appropriations funding sources, to see if the towns had capacity to support the project in that way. That was the only clarifier.
Okay, so just to be clear, a no vote on this means that we are not supporting the smaller project, the repair.
Or the larger.
Well, that's clear to me, but I just want to make it clear that it's a no vote also means that the small project wouldn't be approved if that doesn't pass. So nothing would get approved. Okay, and our appropriation is going to be the million, whatever it is, a little over $1 million, regardless of whether it's the smaller or the larger project.
Plus the possibility that the town could choose, the town of Amherst could choose to provide other money, could choose upon recommendation of the CPA committee to use CPA money toward the larger project.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. I have my hand up and use my privilege as a counselor. Dreams are wonderful and I love them, and I hope we see this big track. Okay. We've had a proposal before us for a Department of Public Works for a $32 to $35 million building. It ain't going to happen because we don't have that kind of money. So when I look at this and I think about the needs of our students and deferring this for yet another generation of students, I'll take a $1.5 million track if that's all we can afford. But I want to also say that I feel, and I said this at the Finance Committee, a vote yes for this gives a signal to other towns that we, Amherst, are willing to support our share, maybe more. A vote yes tells the boosters that we are willing to support this, and maybe they'll come forward. A vote no gets us absolutely nothing except an ongoing, completely not usable track. Anna?
So feels a little like a rock and a hard place, right? And I don't like that feeling, and I'm a little frustrated that we're there, but that's where we are. And so I think one of the things I'd like to say is that I would really rather we not be in this position again. And so for me, I think that the fact that we're betting, we're betting as a council that we hope that the funding will be, let me rephrase. I am betting as a council, if I vote yes, as a counselor, that, gosh, I hope the boosters and CPA and all of those other funding sources come through, because no, I don't want the smaller project. And like Lynn said, leaving this is completely unacceptable. So I'm in the same boat as Mandy, and I'm coming to a slightly different conclusion because I think that I can't in good conscience, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out where my good conscience is going, honestly, because the track is unacceptable at this point. I was on CPA when the track came forward, when the project came forward, and CPA said, we would not fund this smaller option if you came to CPA for this funding. We would only fund it if it were reoriented and redone. This is a different CPA, of course, when you go back. However, the reason was CPA funds were also used to create an athletic fields master plan that said rebuild and reorient the track. Like this has been the plan, right? And so for me, this is a frustrating situation to say, we're going to spend we are spending a very significant amount of money to then continue to lose, in my understanding, lose out for approximately 10-ish more years. I don't know, you're saying a generation. I'm kind of stuck on how long that is, but of not being able to host regional or state track meets, of not being able to host games on that inner field. We're losing revenue. We're losing ability to engage our students in athletics in a different way. So for me, the smaller option really doesn't feel like an option to me. And so I'm very concerned that that's what we're going to fall back on. And I can't let this track stay the way it is. So I wanted to express the position we are in and how my brain is freaking out about this, because I'm not happy with where we have to sit right now. And Dr. Morris, that wasn't directed at you specifically, to be clear. Thank you for all of your efforts on this. I just needed to get that out there.
Dr. Morris, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think two things. One is you used the phrase rock in a hard place. So welcome to being part of the governance of a regional school district, because whether it's athletic fields, whether it's a budget, that is the continual challenge of being part of a governance system for regional schools. So welcome. But I think more seriously, if there was a viable for-town appropriation funded strategy for a larger project, I think we'd be having a different conversation right now. The reason that I believe the school committee, and I'm supportive of them in that regard, is it was clear that there was not a for-town traditional funding mechanism that would have supported a larger master plan. I can't speak for all the school committee, but I think I've been in part of enough conversations, and I'll say for myself, I believe in a lot of what I'm hearing tonight, that the larger project has benefits not just for the school district, but for the community that are hard to measure. And we're a regional school district. We're only as good in terms of funding as what the four towns are able to afford. And what we heard from at least 3 of the 4 towns, and I want to be inclusive of Amherst, I believe it was 4 out of 4 towns at that meeting, was that the price tag was significant with other projects that were going on in the town of Amherst. I believe, I'd have to go back to the video, I believe I heard some real skepticism about funding a close to $5 million project in a given other priorities in the town. So I think if there was a way to do it, you'd be hearing me say something different. I believe the school committee would have voted something different. If there's a new funding source that we don't know about, that you all do, please tell us. We can have that conversation. And I'm not trying to be flip, I'm being completely serious about it. But that's why we're in where we are, is that we brought this, we got feedback both in large group meeting as well as in smaller group meetings with different towns about their ability to pay for a project. And where we are is where we're trying to match what we heard from the town's ability to pay. And I think, when we go above what we hear from elected officials and member towns about ability to pay, we end up with contentious situations that often don't end up benefiting who we're trying to support, which is our students and the larger community. So I'll stop making comments about that, but I want to share in the frustration that many of you are sharing, that many of you are communicating. I'm with you. I think the school committee is with you in that, and we're trying to thread the needle on some very delicate finances between the member towns and collaboration between those, and move forward at least with a project that will benefit our students, perhaps not at the level that we'd like, but that's the governance of regional schools, and that's where we find ourselves. So, thank you for your comments, and I don't take anything personally. So I shouldn't say that. I don't take anything here personally. I can't claim that for all situations, but I definitely hear the comments and concerns and respect however people feel they have to vote, because I think it's a suboptimal solution. But for us, it was the best one we could come up with the feedback we received.
Dorothy?
I will vote no for this motion because it is what I would call something that's just too cute. It's deliberately made to put us in this position of not being able to do this or that. And there's some words that are not being used. For example, Reorientation, the case for that was made very strongly. All right. But artificial turf hasn't been mentioned. There's another alternative that's not mentioned, which has not been brought before us, which is to reorient the track and to fix it, but not to do it with artificial turf, but to kind of go against part of our tradition and actually keep up something that we have and not let it get too run down. So what I would say is that we need the mama bear position, okay? The baby bear one's not going to do it, okay? But I don't think we need the papa bear track. I think we need the mama bear track, which is reoriented and do it with grass. And that has not been presented to us. And when it is presented to us, if it is presented, I'd be very happy to vote for it. Thank you.
Andy?
So now, to be clear, speaking as an individual counselor and not as chair of the Finance Committee, I guess there are a couple things. One is that Dr. Morris alluded to this earlier in one of his comments, and it is that just a reminder that the process is that if we vote no, we are making a decision not just for Amherst, we're making a decision for all four towns. Because all four, this is one of those situations where all four towns have to say yes. If any town says no, it's essentially a veto. And just to be clear about why it's not necessarily going before the town meetings of all of the other towns. I don't know what the select boards have decided, but the tradition in town form of government is the select board establishes what's on the warrant, and so that there were actually always two votes in Amherst because the select board would make a decision as to whether or not to put a capital request from the regional schools on the warrant for the town meeting. And if the select board decided not to put it on the warrant, it was automatically then approved because there was no mechanism for disapproval. When we entered our new form of government, there wasn't a separate select board to make that decision. So I think that it really fell to the council to just make the entire decision as a single vote. So we are in a rare circumstance, and I feel very uncomfortable making the decision for all of the towns not to go forward with the track repair, because I see the track as being something that a group of students and a diverse group of students really values having that program, and we need a track that is suitable for their use. And I think the second comment I want to respond to is there were only three options, and I think Dorothy brought that out here, because the third option was, and I think it was maybe $700,000 or $800,000 less, to reorient the track, repair the field, but repair it as a grass field. And that's the one that's not being offered at this point in time. I think that it would, something that is worth considering if we're unable to raise the $4.5 million. I hope that the regional school committee will come back and consider the smaller amount if our Community Preservation Act committee recommends the grant that's going to be requested, and we agreed to it. We can't use CPA money for turf anyway, because it's one of these anomalies in the statute of the Community Preservation Act that you can't use CPA money for artificial turf. So that would have to be from the fundraising portion altogether. So there is a possibility that we may, for a variety of reasons, either because less money is raised, but enough money is raised to do the middle project to still do what is being there, but it isn't going to happen if we haven't voted yes tonight. So I realize it's a lot, it's confusing. I tried to do the best I could to explain it, but that's why I, as an individual, support it. Thank you.
Alicia.
Thank you. I have a couple of small questions, and I just also wanted to clarify that my issue in the Finance Committee was not with fee subsidies for students to participate, but fee waivers. And so that there is a difference there, and that is my issue with that. And then my questions are just a reminder for the larger project. We said the cost would be around 5 million total. I just wanted to clarify that. And then so I understand that we're still hosting track meets and such now because there was one this past weekend, but like how soon are we looking at the possibility of not being able to do so with the condition of our track? Is my first question. And then my second question would be, would there be an opportunity, or when would be the next opportunity for the school committee to revisit this if that were something that needed to happen?
So the MIA, which is the governing agency of does interscholastic sports in Massachusetts, has recommended that we not host meets. There are some dual meets that we've hosted, small meets, but not large meets because of the condition of the track deteriorating. I think on your second question, because the town meetings in the 3 other towns, sometimes they have a fall town meeting, sometimes not. That's a decision that their select boards make. It might push us back another year, but at least another 6 months. If they have enough fall town meeting, it could be considered at that particular time, but they may or may not. Their history has been that capital requests are more typically met in the small towns during their spring town meeting, so it probably pushes it back a year. It's not a decision I can make, it's a prediction.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Alicia?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Shalini?
Yeah, it was a similar question to Alicia, that but if we passed a smaller project and that's what we end up doing, would that allow for the meets to happen, and what kind of sports that would allow to be played and what would not be possible with the smaller project?
Sure, the track would be sufficiently good to go with the smaller project.
Okay.
The way the track is organized is that there's a soccer and other sports have a field that's in the middle of the track, which is very typical. And those are the pieces. Right now, our soccer field, that's separate from the condition of its dimensions, aren't appropriate for us to host games. It also gets very wet. We've improved the irrigation to the point we can, but it doesn't drain well. So the track and field pieces would be resolved with a smaller project. There would be no concerns that way. It'd be the field sports that use the interior field in the middle of the track that would not be improved and still have that challenge.
Okay, and I just wanted to make a comment/question about the secret funding, special funding source. I remember talking to a group of students, high school students, and they had mentioned that a school in California had raised funding through alumni. And so there are a lot of, high school alumni who have such great memories of our school system. And do we have a list of alumni that we could reach out to?
We do. Yes, and I think the fundraising effort that the boosters in particular would organize would tap that list, not just of student athletes, but it may be just alumni who may want to give back to their school. So we do have an alumni directory, and it would be accessed for exactly the reasons you mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle?
I think what I'm really trying to understand is the upshot of a no vote here. So, Andy, you said that the middle project isn't going to happen if we don't vote yes tonight. if this gets voted down, what happens next? And what would sort of be the pathway for the so-called middle project to be discussed by the regional school committee as an alternative option?
Andy, do you want to answer that, or?
I'll start and be very brief, and then either Sean, who spoke to this subject at the Finance Committee, or Dr. Morris might want to add in, but somewhat of it is speculative. If we vote no, then the $1.5 million cannot go forward. It goes back to the school committee, and the school committee can bring it back, which is what the reference was, that it would come at an odd time of year for the other three towns, because small towns work on the basis, and even large towns like Amherst, when it was a town, worked on the basis that you pass your budget for the most part at the annual town meeting, and you try and do that in at a single time. And therefore, it would be a matter that the regional school committee would have to make a determination on how to proceed going forward. And that at a minimum, it is likely to delay it a year, even if it came back for the $1.5 million plus whatever additional cost from the delay. It would come back a year from now and would delay the project for a year. And as I say, if Sean or Dr. Morris have a different perspective, I hope they'll speak up.
Right. Let me just mention, we have three options as a council tonight. We can vote no. If we vote no, that kills this project. Okay. We can vote yes. If we vote yes, it continues to go forward. Although one of the other towns, though they tend not to vote on these kinds of issues in town meeting, could vote no. Okay. We also have the option of letting the 60 days expire. And that expires before our next meeting. And letting it expires is as good as voting yes. I know that sounds strange, but it is the way it is. Okay. Mandy Jo, does that help, Michelle?
Not really, but thanks.
Yeah, right.
I'm going
Welcome
to challenge. Oh, sorry, go Lynn.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Mandy Jo.
I'm going to challenge the idea that this couldn't come back for another borrowing request authorization for an entire year. First off, the school committee at any time can vote to borrow money, and then each of the towns has 60 days to, if they don't want to authorize that borrowing, to vote it down. At any time, a select board can call a special town meeting, and it can be done within those 60 days. We already heard from Dr. Morris that the Leverett Select Board chose not even to put this on the town meeting for this $1.5 million borrowing authorization, which means if this gets voted down and the school committee decides to only go for the smaller project and they vote it, it's likely that there won't need to be a special town meeting, at least in Leverett, because they already decided not to put it on the town meeting warrant once. And so to say, oh, if you vote it down now, no one can authorize borrowing for an entire year is just wrong. Yes, there might be other steps to go through, but if we voted it down tonight, the school committee next week or wherever their next regional school committee meeting is could vote to borrow money again, and it would start another 60-day clock. And so my biggest problem is the school committee said, we're not going to tell you which project we're going to do. Just give us the money. And I'm saying vote it down because I want to know which project they're going to do. And then I want to be able to decide on that project. And I want an idea of how that project's going to be funded with that. And then we can decide then, and the other towns can decide then. And if that's the larger project, we'd have a better idea of exactly how they're going to do it. I don't think they've started raising funds for it. They seem to be relying on the towns to raise the funds themselves without the school committee doing much other than what they say the boosters will do. Like I said, the school committee chair, regional school committee chair, we haven't heard from at all. We haven't seen any big push from them to say, yes, this is the one we're going to go for, and we're going to try our hardest. Which is why I say if we vote yes today, it's going to be the non-reoriented project, pretty much guaranteed in my mind, which is why I can't vote to support it now, because they haven't said, oh, if we get close to the middle project as Dorothy wants, we'll pivot that way. They haven't said that. They haven't said anything else. And so I'm not going to countenance a school committee coming to us and saying, we'll pick the project after you give us the money. I want to know what project I'm funding when I give them the money, and they haven't told me.
Alicia?
Thank you. My other question is, because I think another counselor asked about if we chose a smaller project, which sports or other things would we not be able to utilize that space for? And so my follow-up question to that is, do we have other sports fields that are in condition to support those activities or no? Because I know there's like a larger football field on the other side. Is that in the good condition? And there's a soccer field. I don't know what the conditions of those fields are. And then my other question would be, if we were to vote a certain way on this recommendation, can we send a recommendation along with our answer to the school committee? Like, can we say to them specifically, we are voting this way for this reason? We are hoping or would like to see this response, or something like that, if that makes sense.
We would vote on the order. The record of our discussion essentially gives a sense of that, although there could be some additional message or motion. Okay. Dr. Morris.
May I respond to both Councilor Walker's comments as well as Councilor Haneke?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll start with.
Please.
Okay, I'll start with Councilor Walker. So in terms of sports, it's primarily soccer. The reason that's a more complex answer in terms of which sports use both girls and boys soccer. The reason it's a more nuanced answer is that if we did have a turf field, it could support many sports. The other fields that we have are in, again, I'll use the word suboptimal condition. And so the thing with the turf field is, it's as opposed to a natural grass field, multiple sports can use it over the course of the after school time period without overuse in the same way the grass field doesn't allow for that. So it could involve, field hockey, lacrosse, as well as football and other sports could use it on a rotation, which really would be assisting many of our other sports. I'm going to offer a different perspective. I'm not going to say disagree, because I'm just going to offer a different perspective than perhaps Councilor Haneke said, that if the school committee voted a different debt authorization and expected 3 small towns to call town meetings within 60 days when their town meetings happen in spring, you're right, technically that could happen. I think politically, I would perhaps challenge that point or have a different opinion about the viability of that. When we've received very direct feedback from those towns that this is the project that they could afford in the traditional pathway. So I think that's true. Technically, that comment is 100% correct that we could move forward. But my slight piece of kind of other history that I want to share is that we were at 4 town meetings where this came up. I don't remember there being advocacy, broad advocacy from any of the member towns to go forward with a larger project. So respectfully, I would suggest that the school committee was being responsive to the 4 towns by creating a proposal that fit within what they were hearing from the 4 towns. I don't remember much debate or response to that from any of the 4 towns. So I'm not being protective or defensive of the regional school committee, but I think their task is to be responsive of the towns that fund them. And based on the feedback that the regional school committee received, that I received from the 4 towns, there wasn't large appetite for having a project that was over $4 million, which both the reorientation with natural grass or artificial turf, both of those would have been over $4 million. So I think to go forward by asking the towns to fund a project that we were directly hearing the towns were not willing to afford, and my recollection is all 4 towns were giving a pretty similar message about ability to pay for a large capital project, I think would have been seen as unresponsive to the feedback that we received. So I get the critiques, and I'm not telling anyone on this council how to vote, but I am suggesting that what I remember, what I recall, and what I experienced was very clear information being shared with the regional school committee about affordability. And I think to go forward with a plan that was rejecting the feedback that we received about financial ability to pay from our member towns, I have a pretty clear answer of how that would have ended up, whether it was this town meeting, whether it was a new debt authorization that has a higher amount. And we've been sort of having this discussion for longer than this town council, not this town council existed. And this is a really hard conversation. So again, I understand absolutely a no vote, but I think in defense and response in terms of the regional school committee, we're not a member of a town. We're an independent agency that only has as much money as the 4 towns are willing to give us, right? We're not a department of the town. And that was very direct feedback we heard. If there's different feedback from not just Amherst, but the member towns, if they want to get together and figure out how to fund a larger project, I believe the regional school can be very open to that, but that's not what we heard both in 4-town meeting and after. And that's where we find ourselves today. Thank you.
Anna.
Okay, couple of slightly scattered, I apologize, thoughts. So the first is I'm not convinced there is a middle project. There was reference to Goldilocks and the 3 bears. I don't think that's where we are. I think there's option A, there's option B, right? Because I think those options were very thoughtfully presented. So I guess what I don't want to do is also send people completely back to the drawing board. We have a strategic plan around these fields. We have a lot of work and effort and money that has gone into thinking about these fields. And to disregard that, to say, I don't like turf is inconsiderate to that amount of time and money that's been spent. The other, I'm happy to talk through all of the benefits of turf over grass, if that's an argument, but, and I can do that offline. I won't bore people with that, but generally turf is the stronger choice because it opens up those doors to other sports that we wouldn't otherwise be able to offer, right? I'm trying to think about field hockey and when the last time we had a kind of quote unquote legally sanctioned according to all of the rules field hockey tournament at the high school, because it has to be on grass that's cut a certain, like I think it's 1.5 inches, right? And we don't cut our grass that low. Turf, we could have that low. So once again, I'll remind folks that there's also an opportunity for our community in this. This is not, while it is absolutely first and foremost about the students and the student athletes, both student athletes on athletic teams, but also students in PE classes and things like that. This is also something that would bring more folks to our downtown, close to our downtown, kind of in downtown. It would also be something we can rent out, right? We're talking about something that's larger than just use during and after the school day by students. And we need to consider the implications of that smaller project versus that larger one. So my conscience is still spinning a little bit. I am leaning towards yes, but I'm just a little bit stuck. And my question is, you said until January, is that enough time, right? Are we giving a realistic ask for the amount of fundraising that we are saying would need to happen? And that's kind of an open question. I don't know if anyone has expertise. Dr. Morse, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the sort of viability of that request or, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about as long as one can reasonably hold this in abeyance, so to speak. I think, as you know, the regional school committee, the E&D went over 5% last year with all the pandemic related uncertainties. So there's a pretty significant amount of funds that towns could choose to support this project from, that the region very recently gave back to the member towns. I can't remember the exact number, between $400,000 and $500,000. There's a CPA pieces for the member towns where there is some openness in many of the towns to supporting, and then there'd be the private fundraising. So I don't know. Is there a real clear answer to your question? I don't think it's something that one can know. I do think the fundraisers are waiting to see what gets supported by the 4 towns before taking this on. And I understand that because they're saying, do we at least have the 1.5 million guaranteed before we put time, energy, and resources into fundraising? And whether people agree or disagree, I think it's a reasonable course of action for folks involved in fundraising to see what happens with the member towns before they move forward to try to do the fundraising on their end themselves. So not totally helpful response, but it's where we are.
I'm going to urge the people ask questions that they need answered in order to make a decision. Jennifer?
Yeah, then I'll skip. This part of my question was the feasibility, which Anna just asked, and I'll skip making a comment.
Okay. Michelle?
Yeah. So I'm looking at the Amherst Regional High School track and field replacement presentation dated March 1st. And I heard Anna say she's not convinced that there's a middle project. I'm seeing 4 options on here. And we've already gone through that. We were only given the option of 2. So I am wondering about these other options and why Anna feels that they're not. I'm genuinely asking why you feel that they're not possibilities. The other thing that I'm looking at here is for the larger project, Amherst would, through CPA funds, need to come up with close to $1 million, I think. And I thought I heard Andy say that CPA funds wouldn't cover the turf option. So I'm not seeing how that adds up, because the $1 million, if we can't get it through CPA, then we're sort of stuck. We're not going to be able to get that money. So I'd like clarification on that.
Anna, please go ahead.
I believe, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's specifically that it would not pay for the turf component, but that the other elements, not the turf element, could be covered by CPA. So like the track part could be, just not the middle of it. Does that make sense? It'd be separated out.
I think that you could actually, and Sean might help with this, but I think that you can do the preparation, the field work that you would do for drainage, which was a substantial portion of the cost of doing the field part. What you can't do is invest any money in acquisition or placement of the actual artificial turf. So you can go all the way up to planting the grass seed or doing the artificial turf, but it's that last step you can't do. So the assumption is that that the goal would be to do CPA and other fundraising, at least to that, but you'd have to close it out with the private donations in order to complete the project with the artificial turf.
And just, Anna, do you have a response to my question about why you don't believe there's a middle project?
Not yet. Can I have a couple minutes? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Lynn, can I speak to that just to provide
Please,
clarification?
go ahead.
So I think the project that was chosen is the only one that has turf as part of it. I think the other 2, there's the middle one. One of the middle ones turns it, but still goes with natural grass. So I think the one that has the turf that allows for the resiliency of play in terms of rotating through is the option that was selected. And so again, so there are some middle options, but I believe if that's the only one that has the artificial surface.
Alicia.
Thank you. I'm still just having a hard time with figuring out where I stand on this. But so just to clarify, if we say yes to this option and they cannot, or they do not fundraise for the remainder, they will for sure move forward with the smaller option.
That is correct, as long as all 3 other towns either vote for it or choose to not have a vote, and thus it's like voting for it. Yes.
Okay, and our allocation of the 1-ish million doesn't change regardless of which project moves forward.
For that type of money, once we move to a much larger project, then we would want to tap into other resources that the town has, such as CPA money or other reserves, or the returned E&D money from this year.
And then my last question, it might be really similar to what Anna just asked, but so do we have a deliberate plan for the fundraising in which we say, this is how we can make the rest of this money by this date? Or is that something they're waiting to hear what our answer is before they formulate?
Mike, I don't know if you have any insight into the boosters.
Yeah. So yes, I'll mention that Doug, I think did present a number of different ways and funding mechanisms that could support raising the level of funds. But I do think in terms of the public fundraising, that folks interested and involved in that are waiting to see if the towns support this particular project before taking the next steps.
And do we have like a rough estimate of how much we think would need to be raised in the public funding?
Yeah, Sean, do you have the chart immediately available?
Yeah, do you want me to share it real quickly?
Please do.
So this was the breakdown of the financing for this project. So the total cost approximately 4.7, roughly 1.2 from CPA, 1 million would be the fundraising target. 1 million would come from grants or other. So this is like the returned monies from the region or some other source. And then the local taxation is the 1.5 that you're voting on tonight.
And that's the total project for all 4 towns. But then
Right,
you
yeah.
could also show the Amherst breakout.
So Amherst shares here CPA 947, of which CPA has already approved about 150,000 a couple of years ago for this project. The donations was broken up between the towns, but really that would be sort of a regional effort. Amherst share for grants other would be 890, and then our share of the local taxation is the 1.2 million roughly.
Okay, and if we were to approve this, how soon could they start fundraising? Like tomorrow, or would there be another step in the process before they could start the fundraising?
Dr. Morris?
Yeah, so the Pelham Town meeting is on the 14th of May and Shutesbury Town meeting is on the 21st of May. So I imagine there'd be an interest in seeing how those towns either choose to vote or not vote, as President Griesmer said, and then it just is the same as voting yes, or if it gets voted down before folks started in earnest. So I think tomorrow, maybe not. I think later this month, yeah.
Thank you.
Shalini?
I just want to clarify what I'm hearing. It sounds like it's ambiguous because we don't know whether we'll raise the funds, but what I'm hearing is that what the regional school committee has heard from the member towns is that they can only support $1.5 million. And however, the parents and students are wanting to fundraise, and we need to give them a fair chance to fundraise. And if we don't even try that option, we will never know. I mean, we know just coming from Drake that in the middle of a pandemic, they were able to raise $1.5 million for, I think $1.5 million for a music place. So if we don't even give this a shot, how do we even know? And worst come to worst, then we will come back to at least a track which is decent enough and safe enough to host meets and for the students to continue to do what they do. And they need track, they need outdoor, they need sports. So I'm going to support this.
Dorothy?
I still am very unhappy with the choices, and I want to hear more, I guess, from Mandy Jo about the reorientation, because if we go ahead and vote this and they don't get the funds for the full plan, then we get a track which has not been reoriented. And I gather that there was money spent and experts hired who said that we needed to have it. And I'm speaking as somebody who's very sun sensitive. The idea of playing into the sunshine, not a good idea. So I have not been told what that option would be. The middle option, I gather it was priced out. I don't have any idea what it would be. It just seems very strange to me that it would cost almost as much as with the artificial turf. It should not be that close to it. So I think I'd like to know more about the report that said the track had to be reoriented and what it would cost if we had that middle plan. Thank you.
Kathy?
I think I'd have just one question. Dorothy is the one who has raised issues of turf versus grass. So while we've been sitting here, I've been looking up the injuries on soccer on turf versus grass. It's a 45% increase in ACL tears, particularly in women, 58% overall. So my question is, was there any discussion of this at the regional level? Because the 3 or 4 articles said the reason schools go for turf is just what you said, Mike. It's easier to maintain. You can play on it during rain, but it looks like the injury statistics are coming in with a yes, but. So if we vote for the 1.5, so I have 2 questions. Was that discussed at all? Because I can see why it would end up being a preferred choice. Second is, if we go for the 1.5, does it have to be turf? Or is there an option to do something else?
Mike?
Yep. So I know it was the recommendation of our athletic director. It's very common, and I do wonder about the research you cite and whether it's looking at turf from 15 or 20 years ago, which was much less flexible. Or more recent updates to the surfaces, which have a lot more give. And I haven't read the research you're citing, Kathy, so I'm not saying that it doesn't, but I wonder.
This clearly is just a few, but they were 20 and 21 studies. I don't know either.
Right.
It was clearly coming down for soccer in particular on ACLs. Yeah.
Right. So again, without seeing those, I can't posit, but I know our athletic director and our kind of parent group and boosters are strong supporters of turf. And the reality is, for many of our high school athletes, soccer being one, but there's other sports, the kids are playing all year long, and they're mostly playing on turf when they're not playing at our high school. So this isn't the only surface they play on throughout the year. And every club team in the area, their home field's on turf, and they're practicing on turf multiple times a week. So yeah, I'm not saying that's a good, but I think that is the reality. Particularly, soccer is the sport. Youth soccer is the sport I know the most about at this point, and I know that to be the case. I think in terms of what happens moving forward, if the fundraising is designed, I think that was your second question, right? Is there flexibility of what the project might be if the fundraising happens after? Is that accurate, Kathy? Okay.
Sorry, yes, I can.
Okay. I mean, I think that could be, someone raised feedback for the regional school committee as a topic. I do think it's my personal opinion, not the committee's, but my personal opinion, it'd be really hard to fundraise $3 million for a natural turf field, given the wetness and the conditions in Amherst in general, and particularly on the land that's near the high school. The level of the irrigation system and maintenance would be a significant increase in maintenance costs. And frankly, DPW personnel who do a fabulous job with a not great deck they've been handed with the fields that they maintain, and they're wonderful, and they work. You'll see them out all the time throughout the year, as I do, and I know Paul does as well. So could that be a discussion? I think it could. Do I think that that's realistic in terms of fundraising? I honestly would question that, because there's a lot of interest in not just soccer, but all the other sports being able to use it. So I think when you think about fundraising, you think about who's a direct beneficiary, and you broaden that pool and you have more people supporting it. If it's just for one sport, I think that's I have doubts about the fundraising ability because it narrows by a large margin the directly benefiting or affected people anyway, if that makes sense. You have better language as an economist than I have for it, but I think you'll follow.
I'm more than willing to continue to call on people, but I really just have to say I would like to bring this to a vote. Unless you have something you need to add to this discussion at this time.
I'm sorry. I'd like to respond to Michelle's question from earlier.
you'd like to respond to Michelle's question earlier.
Yep, she had asked me a question.
Go
and
right, go right
Well,
ahead.
but Mandy still has her hand up as well.
Okay, Mandy.
Thank you. I just want one question and one clarification. Dr. Morris just said that I think it was Shutesbury's town meeting is on the 21st, but that's more than 60 days after the school committee voted. So Shutesbury's given up their rights to do anything other than approve this, is my understanding. So to say that they would have to wait till the 21st to do any fundraising seems odd when I believe the deadline to disapprove this is May 14th, which is, I believe, what you said Pelham's town meeting was. So I just wanted to make sure that I understand that correct, so that Shutesbury's pretty much already pocket approved this by setting their town meeting date after the 60-day deadline. And then my question is, part of my biggest concern is that school committee might get, 3/4 of the way there by January, whatever date. And then they'll just give up. Instead of trying to see if there's other ways to do it, maybe by asking Amherst. I agree. At the 4 towns, you heard from our manager, Paul Bockelman, that he didn't think it was feasible to do the larger project. But this is the first time the council as a whole has talked about the larger project. We did not talk about it before the 4 towns. We did not make any type of agreement before that. And I don't know whether the other towns did or not either. And so, yes, you might have heard some things, but we've never been asked, other than seeing this plan, what our capacity might be as a town council and willingness as a town council. So if this goes forward and if they get close and they're not there, I urge the school committee and Dr. Morris and Dr. Slaughter to come talk to us, to come talk to the other towns before they just give up and don't reorient a track. And that's part of why I'm very concerned about this vote, is because I've never heard any real desire to revisit it versus just, if it's not there, we're moving to the non-reoriented part. And I don't have any assurances that we'd ever have any other conversation. And that's my no vote is kind of a protest vote in some sense, not because I don't want the track project, but because I don't think we've been consulted enough in terms of any flexibility.
Thina, could you put the actual financial order up for this? Okay. So the reason I have asked you to do that is to see what the vote actually says. Okay? Because the vote actually does not refer to any fundraising. It only refers to the 1.5 million. Correct? So given that, then the school committee could certainly come back to us. Mike, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, just briefly, thank you for catching the calendar date. Since we haven't heard anything from, concerns from Shutesbury and Pelham, I think it's likely that they could move forward. So thank you for that counting error that I made. So I appreciate it. I think on the larger question of coming back to the town council, if they get part of the way there, I can't speak for the regional school committee. I'm very invested in seeing this project through in a much better way than just the track. And I don't think there's any reason why, through the town manager or through the president, you can't ask for progress updates and have those conversations along the way. So again, I'm not going to speak for President Griesmer or the town manager. I know they've been in conversations, and I know your assistant town manager is a huge supporter of this project and is heavily involved. And I won't speak for Dave, he can speak for himself, but as an enthusiastic, I think it's fair to say enthusiastic about the prospects of the larger project. So you know how to find us, and I think the collective and individual you know how to find us, and be talking about this throughout the next 7 months and seeing where we are and seeing if there is more resources that any of the towns want to or feel like they can dedicate to the project. So that was my only response to that, but I do appreciate and understand the different points of view.
You can take the order down. Anna, you were going to respond to
I
Michelle.
am. All right. So looking at the list of options, so 1A, so the things that Michelle was referenced, the slide presentation, oh, these words that Michelle was referencing was, yes, dated March 1st. And 1A was the existing track to resurface. That's currently on the table. 1B was to enlarge the track in its current orientation and to allow for natural turf in the inside. You know, this is just shy of 200,000 less than actually fixing the problem, right? And reorient one of the problems, one of the many problems, and reorienting the track. So in my mind, that would be financially irresponsible. I think 1A is financially irresponsible as well, but that's where we are. Number 2, option 2 was the natural turf field. And then option 3 is the same thing, but with the synthetic turf field. Again, recognizing that synthetic turf is more expensive. I believe that it was based on the recommendation of DPW or other folks who understand the environment, that natural grass would not be a lasting, financially wise move, given how wet the area is and how much use they want to put on it. So for me, that's why it's not a middle option, right? Is because it's not actually fixing the problem. That's why that is why this is in front of us in the first place, which is all of our sports teams are not able to use the track or the interior because of either the way it's oriented, because it's muddy and out of commission, because it's not mowed to the length it needs to be for their sport, or because the track has gaping holes in it. That's my quick and dirty take on it. I think I do want to back Mandy's ask to come back to us if it doesn't look like that. I fully agree. Where my conscience is landing, because as Lynn reminds us, our job is to vote, and I will vote, and I will be voting for this because partly I do not think that this is the place for a protest vote. I don't believe in protest votes, but especially not when the people who are stuck in the middle are our students. Absolutely not. And the other ask that I have is for our school committee to please don't put us in this position again. This is the other thing to consider, right? Is that the school committee decides the most appropriate project and puts it forward for the council to represent the public in deciding what we want to fund. Our job is, can we afford our share of these projects? When we're not given a project, that job is very hard. So my ask is to, if we want to be considerate of the roles at play, be respectful of the roles at play and give us a clear decision on what we're asking our community to fund. And then lastly, because you've given me a microphone, this is a plea to our community. The more expensive option, yes, it's more expensive, and it seems clear that that is the right choice for the future of our students, for the future of our schools, and it's what we need. And so this is absolutely a plea to our boosters, to our alumni, to my fellow Go Canes alumni. This needs to happen. And so for me, that first option, I'm going to vote yes for this, but it's got to come through. Thank you.
Okay. The motion's been made and seconded. Unless there are questions of clarification in order to vote, I'm going to go ahead and take this. Shalini, a clarification?
Just last question, just to get a sense. I'm pretty much decided I'm voting yes, but just for the public, just for everyone's sake, do we have a sense, and I haven't been following the debate, so do we have a sense from the parents, from the booster parents and whatnot, like what is the level of confidence they have in the fundraising?
I don't think
No?
that's.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's other folks who are probably better positioned to answer that than me. I think there are examples of projects that have received significant fundraising in the time period we're talking about. But, I think the world we're living in now, so much is unpredictable, particularly fiscally, that I think it'd be hard to hazard a confidence level estimate.
Actually, I don't mean like the confidence that they will fundraise, but the confidence in them wanting to go out and do the fundraising.
I have no concerns about the desire or energy level. I'm sorry, I misinterpreted. My apologies.
Yeah, no, I wasn't clear. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move to a vote, and a vote yes is to approve the $1.5 million. A vote no is a vote to say we don't want this project. And an abstention is whatever an abstention is. Dorothy, Pam.
I object to being played with. If we're supposed to vote for something, then the motion should be for what we're supposed to vote. This motion that we're voting on is not for what we're supposed to do. So I can't vote. I have to abstain.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
I'm sorry, yes. Kathy Shane,
Yes.
Andy Steinberg,
Yes.
Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
Alicia Walker.
Sorry, I just want to say, because I originally voted no to this, that I still have an issue with the funding, but that I also did speak with some of my high school friends who are athletes, and they all of them said that turf, that they wanted to see turf. And so I'm changing my vote to yes, and I really am going to hope that there will be a very strong effort for fundraising. And also support Mandy Jo's ask that they come back to us if it doesn't go through.
Shalini?
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis?
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier?
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye. Mandy Jo Haneke?
I am a no, but I object to Lynn telling me what a no actually means. So my no is not for the reason Lynn said a no vote would be.
Okay. Anika is absent. And Michelle.
Yes.
And so it is 11 in favor, 1 opposed, and I'm sorry, it's 10 in favor, 1 opposed, 1 abstention, and 1 absent, correct? Thank you. We are moving. Mike, thank you for joining us. I know that I think you're being able to answer the many questions that were asked tonight was invaluable to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're moving on to the establishment of rental registration permit and inspection fees in accordance with General Bylaw 3.5, residential rental property. The sponsors for this are Mandy Jo Haneke, Michelle Miller, Pam Rooney, Kathy Shane, and Jennifer Taub. It has been reviewed by the Finance Committee and the Town Services Committee. Andy, do you have a report or just a vote from Finance?
Finance Committee voted to recommend, and this is included in the report, the written report that was provided.
Okay, Dorothy, TSO?
TSO voted unanimously to support the proposed revision of fees under General Bylaw 3.50, as in the report from the last town meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion, look for a second, and then if there's any discussion, we can have it. In accordance with General Bylaw 3.50, to adopt the following fees for registration, permit applications, and inspections. Fee for registering and obtaining a rental permit in accordance with the bylaw for a parcel with a maximum of 6 units, with at least one of the units occupied by the owner as a principal resident, $100. For all other parcels, $250. Fee for inspection by the code official, $150 per inspection. Is there a second?
Second, Devlin Gothier.
Thank you. Are there any further discussions or comments? Michelle?
I just had a quick question. I think Sean mentioned during the budget that it had incorporated the parking permit fees into the budget, or that you all had. Is that true for this, or has this, because this wasn't voted yet, you hadn't considered that for the budget?
Mr. Rockman?
Yeah, this would be a minor addition to the budget. It's incorporated into the overall projection of income from it. So it doesn't really impact the actual budget, but yes, I think they factored this in.
Pam Rooney?
I would like to amendment.
Yep. Do it. It is.
Okay. there's been some discussion about the inequity that seems to be apparent in this fee structure. And I think one of the things that we are looking forward to as we develop the bylaw itself is to resolve that inequity between owner-occupied small units and large complexes. So I was proposing to actually make this amendment to strike the words. So I would move to amend the motion by striking the words registering and obtaining, and instead replace them with processing the registration to obtain. And that puts the emphasis on this fee right now is simply for the processing of an application. And therefore, if you process one application for one unit or one application for the 25 in the complex, it is the same staff work to do either. So at this point, I would make this new motion.
Athena? Thank you.
The intent is the same. It's simply clarifying that it is for the processing of a permit.
Is there a second to the amendment? Oh,
Second, Taub.
I'm sorry. Yes, we have a second. Okay, now let's speak to the amendment.
You mean since I've already spoken to it?
Yeah, I mean, so you're basically.
I'm clarifying that the fee is for the processing. The fee is the same work, whether it is for one unit or for 20, and therefore we're avoiding the appearance of an inequity because it is simply for the processing of an application.
Okay, Michelle.
I'm going to skip because maybe if I hear from others, I'll understand this clarification better. Right now, it's not registering. I'm sorry.
Mandy Jo.
I'm wondering if Rob or someone from the planning department or inspectional services can tell us whether this actually makes a substantive change to to this fee structure, given the language in the bylaw. And I'm still looking up the language in the bylaw, but I worry about using the word processing versus the actual permit, such that maybe we'd be not charging for actual permits at all, or maybe since there's already a fee for the permit, that this would be adding an additional fee on top of the permit. So I'd just like to hear from staff about something like that, because I wouldn't want to mess with the language that's been vetted by staff in some sense and do something unintended.
Athena, Rob Mora informed me that he would be in the audience, and he is. Would you please bring him in? Rob, do you have a observation, opinion about this change in language and whether it changes the actual fee structure? Mandy Jo, did I capture your question? Okay. I'm looking for Rob.
Thank you, Rob Moore, Building Commissioner. My reaction to it is just that, possibly confusion to the applicant who would be reading the fee schedule. I think a fee to register and obtain is clearer to the applicant, where processing is something that the staff would be doing in response to that registration. So I just find it to be a little bit confusing. I'm also looking up the language in the bylaw to see if there's any conflict, and I haven't found one yet. The bylaw does discuss the registration and permit issuance, not the processing of.
Okay. Mindy Jo, you were also looking for the bylaw. Did you see anything?
I mean, the bylaw in the data block says fee for registration, permit application, and inspections determined by the town council. I don't know whether that helps clarify this at all, because I think I'm confused like Rob might be of, I haven't gotten into the bylaw itself, but that's what the data block says.
Pam, is the intent of your motion to change the actual amount anybody pays?
Oh, no.
Okay. Andy?
Just that I'm not sure whether that makes it harder to justify the $250 fee for those units. Because if it's really for a very narrow, the narrow the purpose it is, if it's just processing paperwork, then there really is no justification for the larger $250 fee for those units.
Kathy?
I think the original language is clearer. It is clearly a registration fee to get a rental permit. I do think the word processing introduces a different concept. So I don't see why there's an equity issue. I understood what Pam said, but we've differentiated. This differentiates between a smaller group and a larger group, and it just says there's just a different permit amount. Yeah, I'm sorry, Shalini.
Yeah, I don't support this just because it doesn't really address the equity issue. I understand the equity issue that Pam is referring to, and I was the one who was talked. And I don't think just changing the language is going to rectify it, because the fact still remains that people will still be paying $250 for a single family unit rental, and it'll be borne by the tenants. And so and for no difference in the service, they're still filing the same registration like everyone else, and they are now going to be paying way more than they used to. But I think the only way we can get around that is by talking to people and explaining to them that this increase is so that we can hire an inspector and then have in place a more equitable system in the future. But I don't think changing the language at this point is going to address the inequity. So I would leave it the same.
Jennifer? Pam?
Pam Rooney withdraws her amendment.
Okay. The motion to amend has been withdrawn. The person who seconded it was Jennifer?
Yes, so I'll
Okay,
withdraw.
thank you.
We did
All
not.
right, we're back to the original motion, and that motion is in accordance with General Bylaw 3.5. It's okay. To adopt the following fees for registration, permit applications, and inspections. Fees A, for registering and obtaining a rental permit in accordance with the bylaw for parcel with a maximum of 6 units, with at least one of the units occupied by the owner as a principal resident, $100. For all other parcels, $250. Fee for inspections by the code official, $150 per inspection. That's the motion. It's been made and seconded. Moving to a vote. I'm going to start with Pam Rooney.
Aye.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
Jennifer Taub.
Aye.
Alicia Walker.
Yes.
Shalini Bowman.
Yes.
Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gauthier.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye. Mandy Johanicky.
Aye.
Anika Lopes. I'm sorry, I keep doing that. Michelle Miller.
Yes.
And Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
It's unanimous except for one absent. I would like to thank the sponsors of this. And I know you are continuing to work in a much larger and much more comprehensive rental bylaw in CRC. So we'll be hearing from you some more, but thanks for doing this. And we passed it in time for it to be applicable to this fall. Okay. Appointments, we have none. Committee liaison reports, Mandy Jo, CRC.
Just basically that we still need people to urge people to submit CAFs for Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay. Elementary school building, Kathy.
Lynn already notified at the very beginning that there is a community forum on Thursday night at 6:30, and everyone here is totally invited and urged to come. On Friday morning at 8:30, we have the regular committee meeting, and at it, we're going to hear about the update of the traffic report, potential mediation at the Fort River and Wildwood site. This will be the first time we've seen that. We also did receive comments back from MSBA on our preliminary design program. Those will be posted in the packet. It won't be a discussion. We have to get them back to MSBA. So there's going to be an update, I think also on some staff review of the potential layouts of buildings in the two sites. And depending on what the turnout in the community forum is, we'll be talking about what we heard at the community forum, because they're going to be getting information that we've had, but they haven't necessarily seen. And for those of you who were at the last meeting or heard it, the two technical experts who did the site geotechnical will be at the community forum. So they will be part of that presentation on Wildwood and Fort River.
Okay. And the presentation, if you're not able to make it, will be taped so that you can see it as well. Okay?
Pardon? I didn't.
The presentation will be taped so that you can see it afterwards.
Absolutely. This
if you're
will
not
be,
able to
we'll be posting it afterwards. And, you know, we're totally open as a committee to getting public comments any way we can get them.
Okay. Finance Committee, Andy.
Yes, the Finance Committee is beginning its work on the 30-day referral of the budget tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. And the four things on the agenda is general budget overview, questions, discussion about the budget as a whole without having gone into the specific departments. Then the capital improvement plan is the second thing on the agenda. We were referred an annual vote that has always gone to the town meeting and now the council on optional tax exemptions. And then we have the water and sewer rate referral that was made. So those are the four items. And I just want to comment that all of these meetings now are being posted during the budget season as council meetings. It's not with the expectation that every councilor has to come or is expected to come, but we want to provide the opportunity for counselors to be able to come. And if we end up with a quorum of the council being present, including the 5 members, if we haven't posted as a meeting, then we're in this odd position where we have to move all of the counselors who are not on the committee to the second list, and they can't be attendees. You can't be attendees, and we want you to be able to be attendees so you can participate in asking questions in the various departments. And so that's the purpose. If it's to give you the choice to come, and if you come, then to be able to participate in full.
Thank you. GOL, Michelle.
There is an impending vacancy for a non-voting resident member of the Finance Committee. So just to say, if you're interested to get a CAF in on that.
Great, thank you. Anika's not here. Paul, is there anything on the library building committee that you would like to share?
I didn't attend the last meeting, so I don't have anything to update.
Okay. It was very nice to see many of you at the open house the other day as we walked around and looked at pictures and made comments. I had an opportunity to meet the new OPM, and that's about it. TSO, Dorothy?
We haven't met since the last town council. We'll meet this Thursday. And we have a hearing on parking at Kendrick Park that will start the meeting. That's it.
I do have a request of TSO, and that is that at this next meeting, you discuss some format, and it's up to the committee, whereby you would specifically invite people to comment on the water and sewer proposed regulations and bylaw. We've had a couple requests from people about that. Okay.
Okay.
And you would be the appropriate committee to do that. Although the issue is also before Finance Committee, it's really, that's only the financial side of it.
Okay. Right.
Any liaison reports? And by the way, TSO can decide they don't want to, do anything, but I would like to request that you at least discuss it.
Right, right, great.
All right. Okay, we're at the approval of minutes. But we had one set of minutes were taken off of the consent agenda, and Kathy, you asked that
right.
be taken off.
I did speak to the reason why.
Yes.
My main reason is when I read those minutes, I felt they were incomplete. This was the special meeting we had. I thought there was a robust back and forth with Lauren on a couple items where she gave more clarity to what we can do. And I'd like them reflected in the minutes because it'll be our only record of that. In particular, I'd have to go back to the tape, but my notes say that she said if we came to a meeting where something was posted as an agenda item, we presented public comments and we had a report, we could make the report be part of the public record. And that has not been clear before whether we could do that or not. So the issue is don't share it before, don't disseminate it in any way. But I'd like, right now, the minutes only say what topics were discussed. There's no flavor of what the back and forth. So I'm sorry I didn't read it earlier, Athena. I would have just said this. I just wanted to capture more of what happened.
Athena, we'll bring those minutes back at a future meeting. Town managers report, Paul.
Yeah, just a few things. So the Cup of Joe we had initially advertised as being this Friday, but due to conflicting of schedules, it is now scheduled for May 20th at 10:30 a.m. This is the one with Sean Mangano, Finance Director, to answer questions about the budget. It will be on Zoom, so we can tape it and put that up with all the other collateral that we have. Weekend was amazing. I mean, so many of you were out and about going to, on Saturday and Sunday for the cleanup, which was spectacular, for the Earth Day celebration on the Common, for the Jones Library open house, and for the Linguistic Heritage Festival. A lot of things happening in town, but a lot of positive energy. So thank you to the counselors for making time to be at all these different things. The webinar seminar is on Wednesday at 6:30, and this is where we have the bear expert plus our animal welfare officer who will both be presenting on what to do about bears and why are they here. And the last piece is to let you know that the fire chiefs, the legislation at the state level to allow the fire chief to work beyond his 65th birthday was passed and signed by the governor. Incredible appreciation to our state senator and state representative for pushing that through, and it took them a heroic push by them to get it through in a timely manner. So thank you to Mindy and Joe for that.
Okay. Questions of the town councilor. of the town manager, I'm sorry. Yes. Dorothy.
Paul, do you have any stats on how many people volunteered and how many tons or pounds of trash we collected?
We don't have that yet. We'll collect as much as we can of information. They were just removed the dumpsters today. They likely will weigh them, and we'll be collecting the number of people who showed up as well.
Because
We'll
it
do that
was
next
great.
time.
Yep. Thank
you. Shalini.
Paul, could you provide some clarification on whether we will be able, the Station Road property, whether we'll be able to recover the property taxes that they haven't paid? And do we have something in place for blighted properties, any law, or anything we can do?
So two different things. So when a property doesn't pay taxes, we put it into tax title. That's what happened to this property. And that means we're first in line whenever anything happens. The property doesn't get transferred until the taxes are paid. So it's in essence a taking, but we don't actually own it. We don't want to own it because then we have to insure it and maintain it and cut the grass and do all that stuff. So we just get first in line at the registry. So if someone wants to buy that, the first check they write is to the town to recover our $80,000. We always recover our money in a situation like that. For blighted properties, it would be an inspections issue. We would send an inspector out if there was a truly blighted property. This is a vacant property. You can look at the pictures on Zillow at the space. It doesn't look very nice, and I'm not sure what the actual condition is, if it was cleared out or not. But we don't own the property, and so whoever owns the property has the ability to sell it. But we just would collect our funds for it.
Shalini, thank you for asking the question. I was curious too. Jennifer?
Yes, I just want to make a comment in response to a statement in the report that it was when I was talking about the redistricting, and it said that Amherst population per the 2020 federal census is 39,263, which represents an increase of 1,444 from the 2010 population, or 3.8%. And I just, wanted to comment, I guess for purposes of planning and policy making, to note that Amherst's increase in population between the 2010 and 2020 census all occurred in precinct 10 of District 3, where Dorothy and I live. And of the 1,000, and this is as per the Districting Advisory Board data, of the 1,444 new residents of Amherst, approximately 1,300 live in the Commonwealth College dormitories, which were built between 2010 and 2020. So during the same 10-year period, the University of Massachusetts increased its combined graduate and undergraduate enrollment by approximately 4,000 students. So if the university increased enrollment by approximately 4,000 students, yet the town's population only grew by 1,444, then our non-student population must have experienced a decline in the 10 years between 2010 and 2020. So I think a declining population of non-student households seems to be a concerning trend. And I think it's seen first and foremost in the declining enrollment in our K through 12 schools. So the reason I note this is I would just hope that, our town leaders, including the council, will look to addressing, developing and implementing strategies that would attempt to kind of halt this trend and sustain and hopefully grow, our permanent long-term community and population. Thank you.
Michelle.
Paul, just following up on our conversation from last week about Amherst Media and checking in to see if there's been any progress on that.
So the building commissioner is going to be looking at the property this week and putting together some numbers. Yeah. I'm sorry, the South Campus where Summit Academy used to be. That's the building that was most interested to people.
Okay. Alicia.
Thank you. So that was half of my question as well. And then the second half was just as to an update as to where we were in the like improving of communication between us and Amherst Media. So we have made any decisions about how we're going to move forward with that piece as well.
Yeah, I think we had talked about some options on that. I mean, since your last meeting, I haven't really done much on a follow-up on that, quite honestly. I was out for 2.5 days last week after your meeting. So, but that's on the agenda to talk about with them as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, just very quickly, I provided a president's report. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. I did answer one that came from a resident, and that was to clarify that the letter in support of increased federal money for the Jones Library was not to reduce the amount that the town had to pay, but was an attempt to help the Friends of the Jones Library and the fundraising committee to obtain additional money to help them meet their goal, which now has increased because of the increased cost of the building. Are there any other questions? Pam Rooney.
So was the money that you are seeking, is that not possible to reduce the town debt?
No, it was never with that intention. The intention of the Jones Library fundraising and the Jones Library Friends combined was to reach a 6 million something. It's now increased because of the increased cost of the building. And that letter was around their fundraising. And the only reason I would write such a letter is because it was already a project approved by the council. And our vote already approved the amount we were giving them. Alicia?
I was just wondering how much the increase of their what was the increase of their portion due? And if we are like seeking to funds for their portion, is there any plan to also seek funds to offset our portion?
Our portion will not increase. So all of the increase, which I don't know that you have a final figure on that at this point, it's in constant flux, but their portion is the only thing that might increase. There will be no more money coming from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, and there'll be no more money coming from the town.
Okay, sorry. So we don't know that there is an increase. We just are, we're projecting an increase.
We're projecting it because of inflation and all the other issues that are driving construction costs up all over the country. That there might be an increase, but we've not been asked or told what that increase might be. And they're not in a position yet to come up with a final number. This is really something that I think the library building committee is much more able to answer.
Okay, and then I also have a question on a separate issue. Also in the president's report, there was a mention of like in the section meetings with groups and people outside of town government, there was mention of a meeting with Senator Comerford and Representative Dom regarding the MSBA funding formula issues. And so my questions there is like, what were the takeaways from that meeting? Did we come away with any action items, any answers, like just as an update as to what happened in that meeting? And also just wondering, like some of these meetings, I understand that you take up on your own, but if the elementary school building committee was aware of this meeting, and if we could get like regular updates, if you do have meetings that would affect some of the, because some of these questions are questions that I want to know the answer to. And so I would love for Kathy and I to also be included in like notification as to when these meetings happen and then what the outcome is after.
Right. So the three issues are the issues that you as a committee have been discussing, the issues with the formula. By the way, Town Manager Bachman was also part of that discussion. So we took those issues. Those issues are the fact that the cost per square footage that MSBA reimburses for is way below the present cost per square footage as estimated. The second one is they do not reimburse for any kind of sustainability or energy efficiency, and yet they provide seminars on energy sustainability, et cetera. And the third one is they restrict you to 8% of the total cost for your site preparation. And if you're doing various different options for heating, it's going to be more than 8%. So those issues are ones that we've discussed. Actually, we've discussed, Mr. Bachman and I have discussed with Mindy and with Senator Comerford and Representative Dom. It's also issues that Andy has discussed with MSBA as part of the Finance Committee. At this point, it's not clear that there's a path. They slightly raised their square footage, their reimbursement per square footage about a year ago. It's not clear that they'll raise it again. And they're evidently, Andy, you know this better than I do, that was a fairly significant effort last year by the MMA about the MSBA formula, and it's resulted in nothing as far as I know of. Andy, any further information on that?
No, I think that you've said it pretty well. I think that in discussions with MMA's lobbyists, my feeling has been that they're generally trying to continue to allow a larger number of towns and cities into the program. So in order to do that, they're not taking on a larger share of the expenses as costs increase. And it's causing a shift in the burden to the cities and towns. And at some point, I'm concerned that that's going to result in no school construction because no city or town will be able to afford it. I have raised that issue in the Fiscal Policy Committee. There were others on the Fiscal Policy Committee who agreed with this is a concern. You know, our role is it's a group of people that's appointed for whatever reason that we exist. It's a combination of mayors, councilors, select board people. It's not a large group. There are 3 people from Western Massachusetts on it, which I'm one. And the purpose we exist is just to advise MMA on policy issues that are affecting cities and towns so that they're aware of them and can consider them as they develop their plan.
Alicia?
So just to clarify, so was the meeting like because we're hoping for advocacy at a state level for these things, or was the meeting just to share with them how these policies are affecting our process?
Both. And again, just as a reminder, our job as a council is to figure out how to finance a school, okay? And so we're trying to figure out, given their formula, what we can expect from the state, and is there any way to squeeze any more money out of the state, either through the formula or any other funds. And at this point, we haven't seen any progress in that. But if we did not make our state senator and representative aware of the issue, then we would be remiss in not discussing that issue with them. It's a serious issue, and I think you all know it from the building committee as well. But I'm trying to help us as a council to start looking at what's confronting us in the actual financing of the school building project while you're all working on what are we going to build and where are we going to build it.
Thank you.
Is there anything else, Alicia?
No.
Okay, Jennifer.
And you did say you also spoke with our representatives about the library board, the Massachusetts, or just the school?
Just the schools.
Okay. Right.
No, the library was a whole separate thing. It was just that one letter. Or actually 3, because it was the same letter to 3 people. Dorothy, Jennifer, was any other questions?
No.
Dorothy.
I just wanted to say that I think that the use of the funds to offset the Friends fundraising is actually okay, because they said they wouldn't come to us for more money, and we're hearing terrible cost increases on everything that's being built. And so as long as it's all, I mean, it is money that could have been used for something else connected to the town, but if it's, as long as it's not directly already in the town budget, I think it's one way to go forward. We have periods where nothing happens at all, and then all of a sudden we're doing everything at once, and at the same time that the prices go up. So, you know, we're all set with our low interest rates, and now we're in a new time. So I think it's a reasonable accommodation, is what I'm saying.
Kathy?
Just a couple comments, Lynn, on your report on the discussions about the elementary school and the funding from MSBA. I think that is clearly at the top of the list if they can do anything. But given the timeline, we're more likely to get these, that little very hopeful note that Paul had on, here's some money we might get from the Centennial Plant. And wouldn't that be nice if out of the state ARPA monies, out of the state surplus, they say we're not keeping up in the grant making program, but we are going to fund PVs, we are going to fund energy efficient. So I think it needs to be two-pronged. And I know we've had that discussion, but I think it's important to keep saying that because they've been able to work wonders on that. And then secondly, on the library, I would like to get, I know we've got packed agendas, but in reading what the library committee, the building committee has been hearing about the cost increases, and then some reports on the discussion on how feasible is the project looking. So I don't know when we would get a report on that, but not just the outreach, Paul, but really the question if we're thinking costs are going to be in the neighborhood of 5 million more than we thought it was going to be, is there a point at which we say, oh, we can't do it? Or do we have a figure? Because my understanding is the library granting authority won't allow us to change the square footage to the programs or anything else. So it's a very rigid, I don't care how high your costs are, but I just think we should have it on our agenda at some point when there's a little bit more clarity on how much cost is a major concern about this going forward rather than a beginning level concern. So Lynn, I know getting more money would be great, but we weren't even sure they were going to get the 6 million in fundraising when we thought the price was what the price is. If it's $5 million more, it's a much bigger issue.
We can look for a time to do that. We would do it just actually as a part of the regular updates on that committee, since there's really no further decision before the council at this time on the library. Alicia.
I just also want to support the ask that Kathy just asked in updates on feasibility and just what's happening there. I think that would be something I would like to see also. And then I don't disagree with the decision to support them in finding the additional funding. But I just want to make mention of our willingness to support the Friends of the Library as a nonprofit, and then our hesitation to support Amherst Media as a nonprofit. And I think that's something that needs to be pointed out because we were unwilling to support their fundraising needs and finding an additional space. And we didn't even have a conversation about supporting the Friends of the Library. And so I'm not saying that I don't support it, but just saying that that is something that bothers me.
Alicia, I want to correct you on something. Since we have been as a council, we have voted twice to write letters to support Amherst Media. One was for a grant from the Mass Cultural Council. The other one was for them to remain in their building.
But was that under this council with that I was?
First was for a grant for their building under the Mass Cultural Council. And the second was for them to remain in the building they're in as long as possible. And we voted on both of those in the previous council.
Okay. So, well, that's why I would be unaware of those things. But to me and to my involvement, my statement still stands. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Yeah, so I back, picking up on what Kathy said about the increasing costs could our representatives, or could we and our representatives speak to the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners? And I'm sure Amherst isn't the only municipality in the state in this situation. That we submitted the proposal for the library before the pandemic. I mean, it was a whole different reality. And I know that they've been approached again. I guess they've been asked if the square footage was reduced, and they won't allow that. But couldn't that be revisited? It just seems very unfair and unrealistic. And since the whole universe has changed, and even they're saying now with the lockdown in China that might impact the supply chain even further, that I'm just really puzzled and bewildered by why the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners would hold municipalities to a budget and a square footage that was set before the pandemic. And, I would guess I would make the request and ask if we might, with our representatives and as a municipality, and maybe reaching out to other municipalities in the same situation, if we might, approach the board again about if we need to be able to live within our budget, reduce the footprint somewhat.
Paul, do you want to speak to that?
I think that question was posed to the MBLC, and I think that they have the same constraints that every other funding agency has, which is that their funds have not increased, but the demands on them continue to be in existence. But I'll check in with the library director to see exactly if maybe a more formal request like you're asking for might be beneficial for us to do, and engage our state rep and state senator along those things as well.
Because I'm thinking we're not the only municipality in this predicament.
Right, no doubt.
Right. All right. Future agenda items for next 2 weeks from now, I'm sorry. We are meeting at 5:30 as a finance committee and a committee of the whole. The purpose of that, at 5 o'clock. The purpose of that is to have the hearing on the FY23 budget as required by the charter. At 6:30, we have a regular town council meeting. We have a poll hearing scheduled for Pomeroy Lane. We have a couple of proclamations. Our plan is to review and discuss town council priorities. And there have been a couple of different action items since I presented the list to you last time. One was to bring back the issue of parking on Lincoln Ave as a referral to TSO. And another was the potential of updating the housing inventory that was done about 7 or 8 years ago. And Michelle, you asked that we have an item on earmarking cannabis funds for reparation and social justice. That also would be a referral to the Finance Committee. Okay. Are there any other future agenda items specifically for 2 weeks from now? Okay. Any other counselor comments? see none, then I'm going to call the meeting adjourned at 10:18.
Thank you all. Good night.